sign up for one of the 2 remaining spots in our new volunteer graffiti program. So you'll be getting an email that has those 2 remaining dates, and we would greatly appreciate if the council could find a time where we can then let Claudia know so we can notice that graffiti cleanup meeting. If you're able, that's great. And if you're not, you certainly are doing a tremendous amount of volunteerism, and your time is appreciated. And with that, it is 6 o'clock. So I'd like to call the Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee meeting to order. And I would ask our city recorder to take roll call.
Committee Member Watney.
Present.
Councillor Chenoweth. Committee Member Ernst.
Present.
Councillor Geary.
Present.
Committee Member Harmon Ferry.
Present.
Councillor Minke.
Present.
Committee Member Maxfield.
Present.
Councillor Payne.
Present.
Committee Member Mason.
Here.
Councillor Peralta.
I think his intent is to join remotely.
He is on Zoom.
He is on Zoom. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be on Zoom for about 30 minutes, and then I have a school board budget committee meeting at 6:30, which I think will be shorter than our meeting, and then I'll come back on after that.
Thank you very much, Counselor.
Committee Member Cunningham.
Present.
Council President Garvin.
Here.
Committee Member Hart.
Here.
And Mayor Drabkin.
Here. Thank you so much. We'll now hold the election of the Urban Renewal Budget Committee chairperson. At the close of the elections, then the chair will preside over the remainder of the Budget Committee meetings. And I will now call for nominations for chair of the Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee.
I'd like to nominate Jerry Hart.
Thank you. Any further nominations? Not hearing any, nominations are closed, and the nominee for chair is Jerry Hart. And I'll now conduct a roll call vote of the Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee for election of the chair. Commissioner Watney, or committee member, sorry.
Agree.
Committee member Ernst.
Agreed.
Councillor Geary.
Aye.
Committee member Harmon Ferry.
Aye.
Council President.
Aye.
Committee member Maxfield.
Aye.
Committee member Hart.
I'll pass.
Okay. Councillor.
Aye.
Thank you. Committee member
Aye.
Mason.
Aye.
Committee member
Aye.
Cunningham, and Councillor Peralta.
Aye.
Thank you. The vote is unanimous, and Jerry Hart has again been elected chair of the Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee. Thank you very much for your service. I will turn the meeting over to you. Thank you, sir.
And thank you very much. And thank you for this very skinny budget compared to the rest of our work tonight. This is it's a nice way to get started. First of all, we have before us, and I don't have a copy of them, the minutes of our May 17, 2022 Urban Renewal Budget Committee meeting. Are those before any of us at all for approval? I don't know if they are, so if they're not, then we could just pass hold of that.
You need to use your mic.
Okay. Do we have those minutes before us, of the May 17 meeting? Okay.
They're available online.
Okay. Okay, I don't know if it would be proper to go ahead and consider them for approval at this time. I don't know that it's, they were in the packet? Okay, so do I hear any motion regarding those minutes?
I so move that we approve them.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes, so we can move on to the presentation of the budget message by our city manager.
Sorry, quickly, who seconded that so I can, oh, thank you.
Thank you. It is my honor to present to you the renewal budget for fiscal year 23-24. Are we not on? Scott's mic is not on. How about this?
That's better.
It is my pleasure to present to you the urban renewal budget for the fiscal year 23-24. Keep my budget message as brief as the budget. It's your only light lift this week. Thank you. Does it work? You've got the budget message, that's it. Heather has a video presentation that we'll give to you after you hold the public hearing.
So we can go ahead and proceed to the next item on the agenda, and that is public testimony on the proposed 2023-2024 budget of the Urban Renewal Agency. Do we have anyone in the audience who would like to present such testimony? Did staff receive any comments regarding this budget from any member of the public?
I did not.
And I don't think there are any people on Zoom or remotely that are in attendance other than, there are? So does anyone who is watching on Zoom or other digital devices, does anyone have any testimony to give regarding the urban renewal budget? Hearing no one, we'll go ahead and proceed to the next item, which is review and discussion of the proposed budget.
And to introduce that review and discussion, we do have a prepared video from Community Development Director Richards, and Jennifer and I will be available to answer any questions after the presentation.
Hi, everyone. This is Heather Richards. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of McMinnville. I can't be there with you tonight, so I wanted to record a presentation about the Urban Renewal Agency proposed budget for fiscal year 23-24. And if you have any questions, Jeff Towery and Jennifer Quaylar can answer those for you. So the Urban Renewal Agency is a separate agency from the City of McMinnville, but it's managed by staff supports it, and then also the City Council serves as the Urban Renewal Board. It's based on an urban renewal program that was put together in 2013. So what we did was we adopted a plan of urban renewal for both the downtown and the Northeast Gateway District. And then a funding tool for that plan, which is tax increment financing. The plan has 13 projects in it. The total cost of the plan is $30 million, and it's over a 25-year planning horizon. This is a list of the projects that are in the plan, and the amount of urban renewal funds that was set aside for those projects in 2013 when the plan was developed. These projects all should be indexed forward based on when they're implemented. And this also shows the time frame in which to implement these projects based on that plan recommendation. The Urban Renewal Agency has an advisory committee, we call it URAC. They meet monthly, and their job is to implement the plan. And so what they do is they put together a 5-year strategic plan because they want to make sure that they're consciously and proactively investing in the right projects to create tax base, which will then create the tax increment to fund the public improvement projects in the plan. We're on year 5 of this most recent 5-year strategic plan, and so this fiscal year budget is built on this column right here. So they've strategically picked several projects from those 13 projects to invest in. They then discuss how much to invest in each project, both based on need and implementation, and then they bring that recommendation to you to consider. The Urban Renewal Fund has two funds in it. It has Fund 59, which is the debt service fund. That's where the property taxes are collected. That's where our bonded debt is paid. We currently have a bond for the Alpine Avenue project that we're paying off. And then we transfer funds from this fund to Fund 58, which is where we do our annual project allocations. Fund 58 is what we call our project fund. We have program revenue in there, so if we have any projects that are generating revenue, and this year we do, that revenue is in this fund. We also have that transfer from Fund 59, and then we have a transfer to the general fund to pay for planning support. And then we also have all those annual project allocations. This year in our debt service fund, we are forecasting $717,000 in property taxes collected. $710,000 is current year property taxes, and then $7,500 is prior year collections. We also have that bonded debt for about $187,000 for the Alpine Avenue bond, and then we're transferring $893,000 to Fund 58 for projects, and we carry about $100,000 in contingencies. In terms of the forecasted property tax, which was about $710,000 for this year, you can see that we've done several forecasts over the years for urban renewal. When we first put together the plan, we had a low growth scenario and a medium growth scenario. And then when we adopted the plan in 2014, we decided that we were going to put together a scenario that was in between those two. In 2017, we did a new forecast because we were not collecting increment based on the scenario that was adopted. We weren't growing as we had expected. We had smaller growth and slower growth, and so we reset it in 2017. That's pretty much what we've been following since. And you can see it's closer to that low growth scenario. The good news is we're trending higher than that at this point in time, so that's what we'd like to see, but we're still significantly less than what the median growth scenario in the original forecast, or even the growth scenario in the adopted plan. So that's something we're going to have to watch because the projects are dependent upon that forecasted tax increment financing. In Fund 58, the priorities for fiscal year 2023-2024 is the Development Assistance Program. That's been a very successful program for the last 5 years. That's when we come in with public assistance to private development projects to create that tax base and to incentivize that growth that we're trying to see in this area. And we also have an investment in the 3rd Street Improvement Project. This is to be matched with the $600,000 from the city ARPA funds that will be used for architectural engineering services to bring this project to 30% construction documents so we can start getting this underway. And then we have $200,000 set aside for starting a downtown master plan update. The downtown master plan was first done in 2000. This urban renewal plan is built off of that. And we think it's time to update it. It's over 20 years old. We want to get out into the community and ask people what they want to see downtown in terms of public projects and private projects. And then make sure that our urban renewal plan is implementing that strategy, and if we need to update the urban renewal plan, we can. We also have funds in this in urban renewal this year to do a parking improvement project. That's to pave the parking lot at First Presbyterian Church that we use for public parking. We have that transfer to the Community Development Department funds to pay for staff support for the agency. We have $50,000 in there for housing assistance. We have $40,000 in there for district identity improvements. This is a project we've been carrying for a couple of years now, and we haven't been able to implement it due to staff capacity either at the McMinnville Downtown Association or in the planning department. We hope to implement it this next year. And then we have $10,000 in there for a financial consultant. The plan has been underway now for about 10 years. We think it's time to go into the plan, do another forecast, have someone help us put together our maximum indebtedness calculations as things get more complicated with this urban renewal agency as we begin to implement more projects. So with that, that ends my presentation, and I'll let Jeff and Jennifer field any questions that you may have.
Any questions?
Are there any questions?
I have one. Go ahead, Zach.
Just about the inclusion of the $200,000 contingency in the general fund of it, and then the $100,000 contingency in the budget, in the debt services portion. Can you just illuminate what those are?
Sure.
Please?
Yeah, that was actually my recommendation, that both funds have more contingency rather than all going into the ending fund balance. Because I know they're working on several projects, and if opportunities arise during the course of the year, and perhaps property tax comes in even nicer than we're projecting, that gives them the room next year to actually do more work if it's possible. Because otherwise, if it's in the ending fund balance, you're not allowed to touch that money in the upcoming year, except in certain, dire circumstances, act of God kind of situation. So that's the reasoning. We've added more contingency in both of those funds.
Thank you.
That was my question.
I have a question. I've been asked by people, when 3rd Street's going to get torn up and when all that, hopeful not too chaotic work is going to happen. What are the thoughts on that at this point?
So right now, we are in the process of trying to find state and federal funds to help fill out the construction budget for that. We're at roughly 30% design right now, which is about the level of design that you need to be considered shovel-ready to get those kinds of funds. We haven't gotten them yet. We do have money from the city's ARPA funds, and the Urban Renewal Agency has committed funds to the project as well. If we're successful in getting state or federal funds, we would move to complete the engineering and seek contractor to build a project. I think the earliest we would be in the ground would be next year, not next fiscal year, but the summer of 2024. And we have yet to actually put together the construction plan in terms of any phasing. We're early in the work of reaching out with the Downtown Association and downtown businesses to make sure that they're aware of the project. And we'll continue to do that as the project evolves.
I might expand on the state and federal funding asks a little bit. So we've asked our senators at the federal level. Merkley has interest in funding the project. We have asked our Congresswoman Salinas for support. She included this project in one of her 15 recommended projects, and so theoretically that gives it a better chance than it just being a project that we're asking for money, because it is coming through. And so she is, I believe it is not inaccurate to say that she is requesting the full amount that we requested of her, which would be $4 million. We have a similar sized ask in with the federal government. We've also been taking this to the Oregon House and had the support of our Representative Elmer and our Senator Boquist, and we've met with many members of the House and Senate. In addition to that, Council President and I have been testifying at Ways and Means and explaining the need for this, and the state revenue forecast was released today, and it does look like there's an additional, I think it's $174 million, and so it seems as though there's money to be spent, and because of the readiness of our project, one thing that we have been talking about, the council's council representatives that have been going to the House, as we've been talking about the fact that this is shovel-ready, and ideally we would be able to bring in all of these funds at one time so that we can approach this project holistically, thereby lessening the impact on our downtown businesses.
Any other questions or comments?
This is Ann Pagano. Can I just make a quick comment? About Third Street?
Of course.
Sorry, I'm trying to get my video on. Here we go. Good evening. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to note that the timing on Third Street may be, our estimate right now, if things go very smoothly and we don't have any major issues, we would not break ground until 2025. I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any additional comments, questions? I see Zach is bobbing his head up and down, and
I agree a little bit more with the 2025 as a guess, just knowing how these.
I think I said no earlier than.
Yeah, that's fair, that's fair.
we appreciate that, so. And any other questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll move on to the any review and discussion, and I think we covered that item 8, or item 7, and item 8 is the Budget Committee recommendation to approve the budget as proposed or amended. And I don't have a form of motion on that. Usually we have one, but we could probably proceed. Oh, it is right there. I do have a form of budget. So I think we can proceed with a motion to approve the proposed budget as presented or as amended, and to approve the tax increment. And the form of the motion would be, it would be moved by a budget member and seconded by a budget member that the Budget Committee of the McMinnville Urban Renewal District has reviewed and hereby approved the budget for the 2023-2024 fiscal year in the amount of $2,572,556 with no amendments. Could I have a motion to that effect?
I will move
And
what you said.
okay, that would be by Councilor Minke, and a second to that motion?
Second.
And that would be by Councilor Geary. And let's go ahead and do a roll call on that, and we'll start. I always want to call people by their first name, so I am going to do that. So, Lonnie, could we have your vote on that?
I even answer to Bob sometimes.
Okay, Bob.
I agree, and so move, or so approve.
And Chris?
Aye.
And Victoria?
Aye.
And Zach?
Aye.
And Debbie?
Aye.
And Adam?
Aye.
And I just had a senior moment, and I can't read your... Meredith?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And Jerry?
Aye.
And Scott?
Aye.
And there are no oppositions, so the motion carries unanimously.
And Counselor Peralta stepped out, so he
Oh.
is not on Zoom, and then Mayor Drapkin.
That's true. You don't. You're not the presiding officer in this particular thing. I am.
No.
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it.
And Chair Hart, we'll need a subsequent motion regarding the exercise of the tax increment. So the box below the initial motion.
Okay, and the next motion would be the committee would, I would entertain a motion that the committee would approve the tax increment for the maximum amount of revenue that may be raised by dividing the taxes for the McMinnville Urban Renewal Plan area under Section 1C, Article 9 of the Oregon Constitution and ORS Chapter 457. Could I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And by Harmon Ferry, and second by...
Second.
Good to see the Budget Committee members involved in the motions. And I'm just going to ask, I think I can ask for since it's going to be a long night, we'll just go ahead and I'll call for the ayes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Hearing no opposition, the motion carries unanimously. We are also scheduled to continue this particular Budget Committee hearing to the following 2 days, and I would entertain a motion to cancel any further hearings on this particular budget. Could I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
A second?
I'll second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Congratulations, we have one budget under our belt tonight, and we move on to the main attraction.
You have to
Oh, you're right, I hereby adjourn this motion. Thank you. It's good to have an experienced hand sitting beside me. That's true.
Thank you. I might need to close the last one. Great. Good evening again, and welcome to the City of McMinnville fiscal year 2023-24 Budget Committee meeting of May 17th, 2023. I would like to call this meeting to order, and I would ask our city recorder to take a roll call.
Committee Member Watney.
Present.
Counselor Chenoweth.
Here.
Committee Member Ernst.
Here.
Counselor Geary.
Here.
Committee Member Harmon Ferry.
Here.
Counselor Minke.
Here.
Committee Member Maxfield.
Here.
Counselor Payne.
Here.
Committee Member Mason.
Here.
Counselor Peralta. He's not on Zoom. Committee Member Cunningham.
Present.
Council President Garvin.
Here.
Committee Member Hart.
Here.
Mayor Drabkin.
Here. Thank you. We'll now have the election of the Budget Committee chairperson, and then at the close of the elections, the new chair will preside over the remainder of the Budget Committee meeting. I'll now call for nominations for chair of the City of McMinnville Budget Committee.
I would nominate Jerry Hart.
Thank you.
Second.
Any additional nominations? Nominations are now closed. I'll now, and the nominees for chair are Jerry Hart. I'll now conduct a roll call vote of the City of McMinnville Budget Committee for election of the chair. Budget Committee Member Watney.
Approved.
Councillor Chenoweth.
Aye.
Committee Member Ernst.
Aye.
Councillor Geary.
Aye.
Committee Member Harmon Ferry.
Aye.
Council President.
Aye.
Committee Member Maxfield.
Aye.
Committee Member Hart.
Yes.
Councillor Menke.
Aye.
Committee Member Mason.
Aye.
Councillor
Aye.
Payne. Committee
Aye.
Member Cunningham. And if Councillor Peralta is back on Zoom, then the chair is approved unanimously. Congratulations and thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you for electing me, even though I didn't do the best job ever on that first one. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. We have several minutes before us. This has been a very, very busy budget committee, and that's reflected in the consent agenda, where we have consideration of the minutes of the May 17, 2022 meeting, the May 18, 2022 meeting, the January 18, 2023 meeting, the January 24 special meeting, and the minutes of the April 11, 2023 meeting. And I would ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Chair Hart, before you do that, I do have an amendment to the April 11th, 2023 minutes. I forgot to include the Budget Committee members in those minutes. Thank you, Chair Hart, for pointing that out to me. So with that, I will have the amendments to include the Budget Committee members to that April 11th minutes.
So moved with amendments.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? And the motion carries. This, again, has been a busy year, and it's been a very busy year for the staff of our fair city. And that's reflected in the fact that we have not just one big notebook in front of me, but I have a second big notebook in front of me. And those of you who are, I don't know how you can possibly do this on your computer, by the way. I had to have these printed out because of the issue of trying to understand and comprehend these things. The reason we had to was that there was a proposal presented to the local electorate for the approval of a new fire district. And most of you may have heard the news that that was approved. And because of that, we are going to, quite thankfully, and I'm very grateful that we will not be looking at the status quo budget scenario notebook, but we will be focusing our attention tonight on the fire district approved by voters scenario. And that, I think, should make us all very happy. But I encourage you not to delete your digital copy of the status quo budget or recycle your notebook of the status quo budget, because even though we've had an election, the election has not been certified, and there is a very, 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 very small possibility that there may be some hiccup in the process, and the issue is that if there is a hiccup, the city cannot move forward without an approved budget for the upcoming fiscal year. So don't discard anything. Keep everything on your computer or keep that notebook, because we may have to revisit this a little bit later. Well, not this month, but it would be in June. So stay tuned for further developments. I don't think there's going to be any issues, but just out of an abundance of caution, while we will be focusing on the fire district creation scenario, we still have to kind of keep in the back of the mind that there is this slight possibility. So with that presentation on my part, I think we can go ahead and have the budget presented by our city manager. And I just want to say, sometimes it's hard to get the old lawyer out of me, and so I actually look up every year I look up the local budget law. And even though we've had this thing in our hands and we've had it's been on the city's website, this is the official presentation of the budget, and that's what is supposed to happen at the very first meeting of the Budget Committee. So with that, take it away.
Thank you, Chair Hart. This mic still isn't doing its thing. How's this? A little better? All right, thank you. Thank you, Chair Hart. Also note, in terms of process, we do have up to 3 budget committee meetings scheduled this week. I am hopeful that we can get through the presentations, your question and answers and deliberations in 2 nights, but we have held Friday in case there needs to be more work. And as Chair Hart said, we would recess the budget meeting until after the county completes the certification and formation of the district process in the first half of June. We would call you back. We'd intend to call you back probably on the either late afternoon, early evening of Friday, June 16th, to complete the business of approving a budget for next year. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So while we are going to focus our presentation on the fire district approved version of the budget, we are prepared to answer questions if you have them. We've provided you, thanks to Jennifer, a document that outlines the changes between the 2 budgets. And so while we'll be focusing our presentation on the fire district approved version, if you have other questions, we're prepared to answer those for you as we work our way through the process. The graphics look a lot different because there's no fire department, and so you're going to see some interesting shifts in some of the pie charts and some of the graphs. Next slide, please. As we often do, we focus substantial time and energy on the general fund. That is while it's not the majority of the total city budget, it is where most of our outward-facing services are provided, and frankly, where there's most of the discretionary spending that's available to the city. Next slide, please. This budget will feel both, I think, familiar and unfamiliar to those of you who have been through this process before. It should feel familiar to you because we're going to use a similar panel-style presentation that we did last year, which seemed to really help the Budget Committee work through a fairly challenging budget process. We will have different themes, although you'll still hear some of the things that you heard last year for those of you who are on the committee. And it will feel familiar also because we've really been on this journey for a couple of years. The Budget Committee started in earnest in July of 2021, looking at opportunities and the prospects for figuring out a more sustainable way to support our general fund resources, identifying and ranking our city's core services, identifying the options for new revenue, and focusing on the need for ongoing services, our capital needs, and to rebuild a stable reserve. Significant action was taken last year when the City Council approved the implementation of a city services charge. That charge was implemented in January of this year, so we'll gather about half the annual revenue. We expect that charge to generate about $2.2 million for the general fund in the budget that you're reviewing. Next slide, please. One of the things that we'll be moving forward on is increasing our reserve. We're actually a little bit ahead of our schedule to rebuild reserves according to the Council's adopted reserve policy. And based on not the additional tax capacity, which I'll talk about a little bit later, there are more discretionary resources available in the general fund with the fire district providing fire and EMS services. And so as a result, there are a small number of ad packages that are focused on parks maintenance, housing, human resources, and centralized facilities maintenance and repair functions. And you'll hear more about those during the course of the presentations. We also will be making about a $1.4 million in capital investment that is supported by internal borrowing, and so you'll see that in the transfers. And again, we're continuing to move towards the Council's adopted standard of a 2-month reserve. Next slide, please. I can provide a little bit more information on the ad packages if you want a little bit later on, but I'll move on with the rest of the presentation. The most profound change in this budget is the annexation of fire and EMS services to new special district. And so when you look at how the general fund is shaped, there's not another second large piece of the pie anymore. The fire department was the other large piece of the pie, so it has a different look to it in terms of the services that we provide and how we provide them. You also know from your meeting earlier this year that this budget will not include the $1.50 tax capacity that's freed up by the annexation to the fire district. This group committed to a robust community engagement process. We can talk a little bit during the course of this hearing about some of the ideas that we have about that process, but we would expect to launch that process early in the fiscal year to get some community feedback on the how and the when with respect to that potential spending in the future. One of the things that's important to think about as we work our way through this budget and as we look at that $1.50 out in future years, that's a significant positive impact on the general fund, and it does not cure the fundamental lack of stability in the general fund. It delays the crisis, for lack of a better term. Those property taxes, again, it's a significant amount of money, but it does not grow at the same rate that our expenses grow. And so it doesn't fundamentally change the financial sustainability of the general fund, while it certainly gives us more capacity. And as those revenues do grow, and as we face other service pressures and inflationary pressures, that money would go quickly without additional revenue strategies. Those revenue strategies were identified by this budget committee about 1.5 years ago and adopted into a resolution by the City Council in October, actually I think in November of 2021, and we will be moving forward on that. This budget also shows the first active expenditures of our ARPA funds. We received about $7.7 million in ARPA funds this year. About 80% of those projects that were approved are community investment, community-facing projects, and about 20% of the projects are focused on internal organizational effectiveness and efficiency activities. We went to the council a few weeks ago and got approval to change the allocation of those ARPA funds to the first round of projects. We still expect to have around $800,000 or so left at the end of those projects, and we'll be talking likely to this group again at some point in the future about how to move that forward. We continue to focus, as I've said, on stabilizing general fund resources. This budget cycle puts us a little bit ahead of schedule in terms of the process or the progress that we're trying to make on that effort. Go ahead to the next slide, please. And there's, along with the change in the fire department, there's a significant change in the personal services portion of the budget. We would be down about $2.1 million, and that is exclusively related to the fact that the fire department's not part of the budget. We do have about half of the funding in this year's budget. We expect it'll probably take 6 months or so to transition those fire employees to the new district, and we'll have a transition plan and agreement in place. Next slide, please. And so this identifies the personnel trends. It also identifies the transition of the fire service employees out of the budget at halfway through the year. So the number would decline again next year. Next slide, please. Ooh, that was it. We got through it. Let me say, as I say every year, and this year in particular, this budget has been a lot of work. Thank you, Chair Hart, for acknowledging that. I didn't count the pages, but apparently Mayor Drabkin did. It's about 1,300, I guess. It looks like it because it looks like each of those is more than a ream's worth. The City Council and the Budget Committee was brought together on a couple of occasions. The advice and the guidance that you have given us really helped us to shape this budget. And while it was a lot of work, I feel like we had some real clear policy direction as we were building this budget, and we are hopeful that we have met your expectation. The entire executive team and a cadre of other folks in the organization have worked very hard over the last several months. I want to call out Finance Director Cuellar and Finance Services Analyst Crystal Woolridge in particular, and the entire finance team. I want to thank you all for your commitment to this community and to your service on this committee and the other endeavors in the community, and I'm pleased to present you with the fiscal year 23-24 budget for the City of McMinnville.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it really was a lot of work. So I don't know that us that just come in, you know, we get it and we take a look at it and we try to understand it. It's hard to sometimes to appreciate the level of detail and the level of information that gets presented in these budget documents. And I've encouraged friends to take a look at it, and it's an uphill battle, obviously, to get more involvement. And sometimes you'll catch a lot of flack, but the budget document really sets out the goals and aspirations of the community. And so I don't want to get all teary-eyed about this, but it really is an important document because it does set out our values. And I'm always reminded of Scott Hill. At this point, Scott Hill would talk about he's a numbers guy and how much he loved looking at the numbers. And frankly, I'm not a numbers guy, and I really appreciate the narrative that goes into it. If I start looking at too many numbers, I start doing anything else. I can think of a million other things to do, such as, mow the yard even. So anyway, it's very much appreciated, all the hard work. I see that we have some staff on there. Are we going to proceed at this time with staff, or do we want to do the public comment? Okay, so right now we should be moving into the public testimony on the proposed 2023-24 budget. Is that correct? Okay. So I see one person out in the audience who might have some comments, and we know who you are. So, but go ahead and step up to the mic. But tell us who you are.
Jenny just told me not to look at her notes.
Okay. Mr. Davis, proceed.
Mark Davis, 652 Southeast Washington Street here in McMinnville. I comment on these things practically every year. one suggestion I've made before, I'm going to throw it out again. If you really want the public to comment intelligently about this, I mean, there's a few people like me and Scott that love the numbers, but the vast majority of the people would like to hear from the department heads. I think we have some staff here that are going to speak to explain what's going on, and then they might have some comments for you. I think, you know, having the public comment right at the first makes it really hard for the public to actually say something intelligent about what's going on here. Anyway, I am generally supportive of this budget. You know, I think that management staff have probably balanced a lot of, you know, well, we could spend a little more here, but we don't have that much money, and they've gone through a process, and I'm willing to accept that, you know, this is probably as good as we can do. I'm unwilling to support a revenue increase. I think we've already agreed the $1.50 is not going to be touched, and I'm not seeing anything else. I want to rush out and ask the public to support for additional revenue. So I'm a little hard pressed to say that I want to, you know, if I want to add something, I've got to talk about subtracting something. I don't want to do that. You know, I'm in the public. I don't have to be responsible for that. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about something, and I know realistically this is probably for next year's budget, but I at least want to throw it out there. I support using the 30% portion the city gets from the transient lodging tax for affordable housing. You know, I think we heard testimony to Gwendolyn, the need for affordable housing. I served on the Affordable Housing Committee for, I think, 3 years. You know, the impact of tourism on downtown has impacted the downtown neighborhoods and reduced the amount of housing. It's reduced the amount of housing over some of the buildings on 3rd Street. So I think that that money should go towards affordable housing. And I think I've said this before, I'm repeating it again. But another point I'd like to make and have the Budget Committee start thinking about is affordable housing kind of goes together with parks. You know, it is, and I know Heather's not here to talk about it, but I think it's pretty common knowledge that your affordable housing is denser housing with, you know, smaller yards or non-existent yards. So it's important to cite affordable housing by parks. So I think that the city needs land, and I'm kind of changing the subject here just slightly, but I'm going to get to the point. The city needs land for both affordable housing and parks. And let's see here, Table 10 of the McMinnville Growth Management and Urbanization Plan, page 62, shows a need for, and these are all buildable acres, 312 acres for housing, and 254 acres for parks. And that's out of 700 and some acres.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mark. Committee member is not page 62 in your budget packet.
I'm
He's
sorry.
referencing the MGMUP, the McMinnville. Yep.
The point I'm trying to make, and I'm sorry if I'm being too technical here, is that the city has a need for quite a bit of land in the immediate future to take care of our need for both affordable housing and for parks. And now would be the time to start identifying, getting a committee or a group or something. I know the Affordable Housing Committee, when I was on it, we were talking about land banking and land trusts. That's a couple of ways that we could get land in control for affordable housing. And I know that, I think even at their last meeting, they were talking about those two ideas again. I think they're worth considering. I think the city needs to come up with some ideas of how we're going to get land for these needs the city has. I mean, you know, I hope some people will donate land. I mean, I truly do, but I think counting on, you know, 400 or 500 acres suddenly being given to the city is probably a little unrealistic. So, and I think that's really all I want to say. I mean, this is really for the community conversation going forward. We need to start talking about how we're going to, if we're still talking about how we're going to do affordable housing in 10 years, we're not going to be there because we need, you know, there's land coming in, there's going to be an area plan done soon, and we need to, the city needs to be part of that conversation, not just as approving a plan, but actually as a potential buyer of land so that, you know, some of these things that we want to see happen will actually happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Anyone else, members of the public who would like to make some comments? Go ahead. No, you, please come forward and state your name and your address, please.
Name's John Rickert, 1116 Southwest Russ Lane, McMinnville. I've only lived here for 5 months. I'd like to ask a question to start with. How many of you people have actually read this budget from cover to cover?
Both of them.
Well, that's impressive, because I have too, and it took me over a week. And it's the biggest budget I've ever seen in my life in terms of size. And I've been on tons of budget committees, Grants Pass, Medford, big companies. This is an unbelievable size budget, 1,200 and some pages. Somehow it ought to be reduced. I like your comment, Jerry, about there's a lot of verbiage in there and you probably need that to get through it. That was good. I'd just like to see it reduced. I don't know too much about what's going on around here, but it was real interesting to read through this budget. And I have no disagreement with it. It's just very interesting. And I just thought I'd make a comment like that. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Anyone on Zoom? And I do think, I do recall seeing a letter come in, and is that part of the record?
Well, I don't know technically how to say if it's part of the record. No, I sent it out.
Jennifer received a letter from a public member, and we will put that in the public record as an amendment document to tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. That's. I just want to make sure it's part of the record because that is a public comment. And was anything else received besides that?
No, nothing's come through the emails or the web-based comment.
Seems like we have a little bit of scurrying about here. So, any questions about the record or about public comments or testimony? So, at this point, are we going to proceed with the possible uses of state revenue sharing? Okay. So, I see our 3 staff members are sitting here. You're going to have to bear with us just for a little bit. State revenue sharing law, ORS 221.770, requires cities to annually pass an ordinance or resolution requesting state revenue sharing money. In order to receive state revenue sharing in 2023-2024, a city must have levied property taxes in the preceding year and hold a public hearing before the Budget Committee to discuss possible uses of the funds and hold a hearing before the City Council on the proposed uses of the funds in relation to the entire budget. And so at this time, I'd ask the Finance Director to bring up the city's recommendations for possible uses of state revenue sharing as included with the city's 2023-2024 proposed budget.
So there's a one slide. So this is a requirement of cities in counties of our size, where we need to show how we intend to use the state shared revenues that are sent to each municipality. And so what we have done is taken the amount of money, well, you can't can't see it because it's covered. We anticipate $522,000 in state shared revenues, and we've proportionately broken it across all of the general fund departments according to last year's budget with the fire district removed, or the fire department removed. So this is the proposal for possible uses, and this is a public hearing, so folks can come and give testimony on this, and then you'll see it again. We'll update it if there are any suggested changes, or we'll show this when the budget is actually appropriated towards the end of June.
So are there any questions directed to staff regarding these recommendations?
Can I just clarify that I understood what she said? So you're saying that if the police, for example, is 34% of our budget, then that's 34% of the state money is what's dedicated. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, I will open a public hearing on the possible uses of the state revenue sharing. So that portion of the hearing is now open. Do we have anyone from the public who would want to make any comments on the recommendation of proposed uses of state revenue sharing funds? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. And if I recall correctly, we go ahead and we don't vote on this presently, but this will be incorporated into the budget document itself. Is that correct? So with that, I think we are now, I'll go ahead and close that particular part of the process, and we will proceed finally with our patient staff. Is that correct, Jeff? Do you want to do any introductions?
That's correct. Thank you, Chair Hart. I do want to set the stage just briefly. As I foreshadowed for you during the Budget Committee meeting, we are doing panel presentations this year as we did last year. A different themed approach, though. For the past several years, we've really been setting the stage for developing a budget that addresses our persistent financial deficit, and the work that we've done to date are really the early steps towards creating a long-term sustainable budget. We feel good about the progress that we've made as an organization, and we recognize that we still have work to do. The work of this year's budget is more within the means that we have. It prioritizes the actions that were identified for this body a year ago, and again in this year's proposed budget around the priorities in the city's core services. We are aligned with the city's strategic plan, MacTown 2032, and we challenge ourselves regularly to test these assumptions and to test these decisions against our core values of stewardship, ethics, courage, and accountability. I thank you for your time, and I'll turn it over to the panel for their presentation tonight.
Chair, do you mind asking if any member of the Budget Committee has any disclosures or potential conflicts of interest that they'd like to state before we start?
So with respect to the budget, do any members of the Budget Committee, which includes all councilors, have any conflicts of interest that you would need to declare? Mr. Geary?
Thank you. As usual, I'll note my wife Samantha works for the public library, and as usual, it does not affect my ability to make any input or decisions on the budget.
Anyone else? And thank you, Mayor. You may proceed.
I will also say, as usual, that's my favorite part of the budget. I don't know why. It started with, Budget Committee member John Mead, and then he passed the torch to Zach Geary. So anyway, I'm Jenny Berg. I'm the library director. Thank you very much for your time and volunteerism here, both reading through the budget and sitting through these meetings and listening to us tell our stories. Hopefully more stories than numbers. I'm in agreement with you. Budget Committee Chair Hart. So before I go into the story of the successes, challenges, priorities for next year, I want to reflect a little bit on this last year and where we were a year ago, where I was particularly, and where maybe the library was, just in terms of level of uncertainty. I often am having to remind myself and then occasionally remind staff that the pandemic was not that long ago, right? And some, still with masks at times, but we were really still we were in uncertain times in regards to the pandemic, but we were also in really uncertain times in regards to our budget here in McMinnville. And at the library, we had put a lot of things on hold just in terms of making plans and making decisions. And we'd been doing that for years, right? Because we didn't know what was going on in terms of the pandemic. But then we got to the point where, okay, that's over, but we were still really uncertain about what was going to happen with the budget. One of the, when I go through these slides, I'm going to mention this a little bit, that I feel like the decisions that have been made in the last year and maybe a little bit prior to that gave us a little bit of stability. And I understand, City Manager Towery, we've got stability for the short term and we need to keep on the ball with it. But I want to talk a little bit in terms of what stability can do for an organization, can do for my department, I'm imagining for other departments, and you can imagine it even in your own personal life in terms of uncertainty versus stability. A large part of that for me is that it made it so that we could do some planning, made it so that we could put some things in motion, and it made me hopeful and optimistic, and that allowed us to dream and plan and vision. So with that, I'm going to go into the successes of the library in last fiscal year. Oh, yeah, next slide, sorry. I was hoping to just be smooth about it. Okay, so the successes for 22 and 23, we increased our hours from 35 to 44. That was one where we were ready to do that earlier than August, which is when we did it. But it was another one of those, there was uncertainty there. I don't want to increase the hours of the library and then find out that the budget's not going to be there to keep that going. So talking about that in terms of uncertainty versus stability. So that was great. Really exciting that we were able to increase those hours. One of the things that I do comment on is in terms of the 44 versus the 50 that we were at before. We consider that our home delivery program with the electric vehicle is that's a good addition to sort of make us whole in terms of that 50 hours, which that was a great thing, funded by ARPA, very an exciting success. And then because we were able to tell our story about the library, we're doing really great things, and I felt that we could, with stability and optimism, say, hey public, hey community, look at all these cool things that we have, come back and experience all the wonderful resources of the library. And we were able to do that through many means, but one of them was a mailer that was sent out to all households in McMinnville, Lafayette, Yamhill, and Carlton, and because they all are able to access the city library through various funding mechanisms. And that mailer was funded by the Library Foundation and Recology, and then we also added a bilingual story time. We also had the success, and this I think also has a lot to do with seeing the support from the city government. I think it makes it easier and much more palatable for the Library Foundation Board and the Friends of the Library Board to step up and add additional services. And so they have done that in the last many years and will continue to do so, I'm pretty confident of. So the plaza that was redone back in 2015, I believe, we had that resurfaced just this past couple months, and that was funded by the Library Foundation. A redesign of the staff work area to create some better workflow and more private spaces for people to be a little bit more efficient and stay on task. And that was funded by the Friends of the Library. And then we also had some training and strategic planning funded by the Friends of the Library, which also keeps us moving forward in a really great way, and stability allows for that as well. Next slide. So, of course, challenges, not a surprise to any of you, I'm guessing, and also you'll probably be hearing about this from other departments throughout the next couple of nights. We have behavior issues, we have vandalism, we have theft. Feedback from some community members that they don't feel safe at the library, and at the same time, there's also the challenge of the fact that the library is a public place, and it is one of the only places where people without homes can go during the day. So, pulled in lots of different directions there. Next slide. So, in terms of priorities for fiscal 23-24, fiscal year 23-24. We're going to continue to be doing our work in terms of community safety and resiliency. One of the things that I've been really quite proud of in the last year is the way that we have approached these behavioral issues at the library. We have 3 of us that are particularly focused on managing issues, de-escalating. That has allowed other staff to both watch and learn from us, and also take a breath and focus on the things that they need to focus on. This budget reflects, I believe, $20,000 in security cameras to be added. We've actually used the security cameras that we have in place right now to figure out who are these people that are, we can really track. Oh, this happened. Who was it? Oh, we know that we can recognize that person, and then we're able to exclude them for not following the code of conduct, which has helped quite a bit. It has become a place where people know, oh, you actually have to follow the rules, or there will be consequences. And then, of course, the HVAC assessment and overhaul that's going to be coming. We also are going to be focusing on engagement and inclusion in terms of just even more communication about all the great library resources that we already have and the services that we offer to the community, increased engagement in the Spanish-speaking community, and an expansion of our summer fun program into Upper City Park. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Next.
I do have a question. In the library fund, fines and forfeitures, I assume that that's specific to the library. It's $5,000. Is that really,
Yes.
is that really, are overdue library books really adding up to $5,000?
That would actually, we no longer charge for overdue materials as long as we get them back. And so the issue will be is if we don't get them back. And then there will be a charge.
Okay, I'm just asking, like, more along the lines of just verifying the number, because we went from $12,000 in 2021-22 to $4,000 last year, and are estimating $5,000. So I'm looking for realistic.
Right, okay, so yes, because we got rid of overdue fines.
Okay.
So that's, the number dropped considerably because we went away from overdue fines, and there's lots of reasons for that. That's where the number dropped, and we figured it would be considerably lower, but we are finding that, oh, okay, we're getting a little more income in just from people paying for lost books. Their dog chewed the book up. They spilled wine on it. this is particularly what happens to my books, but, which I pay for. So that's the reason for that number changing dramatically.
Thank you.
Question. This doesn't particularly relate directly to the budget, but can you tell me the difference between Friends of the Library and Library Foundation?
No. Yes, I can. Actually, so that's a question that comes up often, and the reason, a little bit of a joke about the no, I can't tell you the difference, because in the last, about 6 years ago, the Friends of the Library received a bequest that put them sort of in this a little bit of the same playing field money-wise as the Library Foundation. But in general, the Friends of the Library, they're more active on a day-to-day basis at the library. They run the book sales. When you're giving money to the Friends of the Library, the idea is more likely that it's an in and out sort of thing. You're going to see your dollars reflected in the services in the next year or so. It is also a membership-based organization. The Library Foundation is sort of more of a long-term endowment type of thing. Although at this point in time, both organizations are doing a lot to support the library. I think in the budget, I mentioned $85,000 that we receive about every year, and it's probably closer to 90.
Any more questions? Go ahead.
Thank you. You touched on sort of how you feel about your hours and the offset of the home delivery, which totally makes sense, and I didn't think of it that way before. But what does more hours look like? What's the path to, is that in your calculus, hopefully any at all? What would that look like? What would be the hours?
If we were to add more hours, I would probably add them on Saturday and Sunday mornings. We're opening at noon on Saturday and Sunday, so I could see that happening earlier so that it would be a consistent 10 o'clock a.m. Opening every day, possibly. In the past, the statistics have reflected the more hours the library is open, the more people come through the door, the more items that are circulated, the more the library is used. Our statistics are, it's tough to look at statistics in the last 4 years to say, to get sort of a trend of things. And I will say that at this time, I am comfortable with the way the hours are. And especially given with the budget still as it is, with not that we can just be footloose and fancy free. If there was a point where we were able to consider that, I think the best option would be to survey the community about when would you want to use the library, and survey the community that is not in the library, not just the people that are actually using the library, in terms of, hey, is there a reason you're not coming to the library? Is it because you only can or want to come Saturday mornings or Saturday evenings or whatnot? It's also a little bit difficult when a organization is open evenings and weekends, and yet we also have a lot of staff people who, I think I told the story at some point in time, we had a lot of part-time staff people, because it's easier to manage those hours with part-time staff people. But those part-time staff people had been working for the city for a very, very long time and had been wanting full-time work for a very, very long time. And I got to the point where I just, in good conscience, couldn't just keep that going. We still do have quite a few part-time people, but it's just one of those things where it does require part-timers to be able to do that. And then we also have the issue, not the issue, this is actually, I think, a really good thing, but one of the safety things that we have changed is I was talking about those 3 people that we are specifically working with de-escalation and behavior issues. it's best if we're there. One of us is there. And so that would be the other thing in terms of expanding of hours is, okay, you want to still make sure that you've got a person there that is able to manage issues.
Thank you.
I would just note that, going back to your comments earlier about donations, I think most of the departments have a donation line item. You have 5, and also many of the departments have donation line items that are 0. It's at fairly consistent through the budget, and you have not zeros. You have 5 digits cumulatively. So I just want to acknowledge that, and it shows the community's dedication to the library and their love of the library and how important it is. And so it's kind of a congratulatory comment, and I know that's kind of a congratulations, you got donations, but I do think that it speaks volumes that you have not just a volunteer corps and staff, but that you have these 2 different mechanisms for continuing to fundraise for your department and in a significant way. So I think that's wonderful, and thank you for that work.
Yeah, that is a big thank you to the Friends of the Library and the Library Foundation, and know that they couldn't do their work without a very solid foundation from the city. Thank you.
You have 3 staff members, including yourself, who help with the de-escalation. Do you have sufficient training? I mean, is there sufficient funds for training for that type of thing, or is it?
We feel pretty confident. We are trained through role-playing day to day. No, that is true. And I will say that that's part of the reason, so it's myself and 2 of the supervisors. 2 of the other supervisors, while they probably could, they just don't have the day-to-day experience. One of them works in the back, and it's tough. It's easier the more you do it. The more practice you get, the more you can stay de-escalated. There is training through the State Library of Oregon, online training. We bring trainers in. We have had, at times, we've had police officers come and talk with us. And the city has had various trainings. So I would say that we feel, the 3 of us feel pretty comfortable with what we're doing at this point in time. I wish I had a wooden table to knock on, but it's feeling good now, and it's feeling better than it felt a year ago at the library. I feel like we have things under better management in terms of how we're managing things. That's not to say that, it's any public place where something could happen. But in terms of what we are seeing on a regular basis, we're feeling pretty good about how we're managing it. We meet weekly and talk about, okay, this has happened, what are we going to do about it? And it's been really lovely the last couple of weeks. We haven't had anything to talk about because there haven't been a lot of issues.
May I ask an extension of that? Do you keep any sort of data or logging of instances that happen? So when we break ground on the navigation center this year, it's a few blocks away, so the library will cease to be, what was the language you used, one of the only places people without homes can go, because there will be a place just a few blocks away that has that intended use and provides services, food, all sorts of things that so once that is open, in approximately a year, you will be able to come back and hear a report from you in this budget committee session in 2 years that will say, we used to experience approximately X number of incidences per week, and now we see this number, to kind of be able to check and balance ourselves.
I look forward to that day, Mayor Drapkin, and yes, we do keep, and that was one of the things that has been helpful. We talked about, we had it in paper for a very long time. You can go back even and, look at what happened in 2002 as opposed to what's happening now, but we do have it electronically now, and it's also been helpful for us to track, oh, that person, oh, so-and-so had an issue with them, and so-and-so had an issue with them, and now I'm having an issue with them, and oh, okay, this is a pattern. So it's helped in that way, but it's, yes, we will also be able to say, okay, we're seeing a lot less in these issues, and we're tracking them anywhere from, graffiti and needles to some escalated behavior. So we'll be able to see that. And the list from the native plant garden about all the different, how many cigarette butts they found in the native plant garden. And then, so that would be great. I'm sure they would love to do a count and report it to you in 2 years about like, we're not finding them anymore.
Thank you.
Anything else for Library Director Berg? Thank you very much. I remember years ago when the internet caught on that libraries were going to be a thing of the past, and I know, McMinnville, we visit Multnomah County branches with our grandkids, and they're always full. I think that's, it's just amazing to see the importance of libraries in our communities. Anything else for Ms. Berg? If not, we'll go to the next person on the list. I'm not sure if there's Chief Scales. Take it away.
Oh, thank you so much. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, excellent. Sorry I cannot be there in attendance. I came down with an illness this afternoon, or actually this morning. So I do appreciate the technology allowing me to join you and present. I will echo what Director Berg has said. Last year's budget, I think you can all recall that were there, was a little different tone. And candidly, I really want to compliment the Budget Committee, the City Council, on moving some really some heavy lifts forward with respect to the revenue, because it has sort of calmed the waters. So this is sort of the same pattern that Director Berg took. And I first of all, we also do the emergency communications budget through the PD. So quickly, I'm going to run through that. Claudia, can you move to the next slide? Yeah, so emergency communications, this is a budget that provides funding for our communication system. If you all recall, this emergency communication system services not only the police and fire, it also services the school district. It services Linfield University, as well as our partners, I think, at Public Works are also on this, our radio system. So it is a really robust system. It is something that we're extremely proud of. One, because I think we are in a technology right now where I think we're going to be really satisfied as a city for a number of years with respect to both the encryption piece for the police for our safety, but also the fact that it is a P25 system. So really quickly, as I mentioned, it's used to fund our city radio infrastructure. It also, out of this fund also comes our YCOM, our dispatch center dues for police and fire. YCOM dispatching services, they continue to increase, although modestly. As you recall, there was a large reduction in fees last fiscal year after the calculations were redistributed. So we did see a fairly decent savings as a city last year. We're going to continue to pay for that upgrade that we did in fiscal year 1920. As you all, or some of you may recall, we did upgrade that the frequency and the equipment in our vehicles. And there are no large projects or replacements on the horizon. We've done a really good job of ensuring that if there is a system failure, one, that we've got really clear contact with Day Wireless, who's our maintenance contractor, and they can actually remote in and see what's going on with the communication system. But we've also got surplus equipment of the really large pieces of items that if they were to go down and there was a failure within the system, we could have it up and running rather quickly because we have set money aside and budgeted appropriately to have some spare parts necessary. Is there any questions about this specific budget?
Chief, I'm kind of curious about the reallocation. I remember there being a reallocation a number of years ago between police and fire for the city, and I was just wondering, how did this happen? Is it going to go over to the fire department more, or?
With respect, that is something I think that Chief Lightford and I discussed. I believe with respect to the dues, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but I would imagine that their portion of the dues will just be slid over and they will be billed out to the district when the time comes. I did have conversations with Patty Sowers, who's the executive director of YCOM, and that's how she had made it reference that that's how it would be parsed out. Was that the question you were asking, an answer to it?
Well, kind of. I just was wondering, I mean, the allocation, as I recall, shifted, and I'm thinking it shifted more to fire, and now has it shifted back, or where?
No, the calculations remain the same. So the distribution went more towards, I think, probably the smaller rural fire agencies. I think they saw a price increase. Hello?
Yeah, we can still hear you, Chief.
Okay, that's my answer.
Okay, that helps me a great deal. Thank you.
You're welcome. Next slide, Claudia. Much like Director Berg talked about, we had some significant successes in FY 22-23. It really felt like it was a project year with the approved budget from last year. If you've all followed our social media and or any sort of stuff in the newspaper, you've seen that we've added 2 canines to our team, both Storm and Mako. They have gone through the training with our handlers. They're out and about, and they are servicing the city of Mac. Canine Tucker, who is our drug detection canine, as you all know, the fentanyl epidemic in our country and most in our city. I use the term epidemic. I don't want to overstate it, but I think it is a problem that we're seeing. Canine Tucker was certified to now detect fentanyl within the last month or two. Super excited about that. With the increase in our training budget, as you know, in previous budgets, we had really reduced the amount of training. We've significantly increased this last year's training. We went ahead and launched our what is the unmanned aerial system, the drone program. We've got it again in the budget this year to add capacity. I will tell you, as Mayor Drapkin mentioned, this is truly a force multiplier on the road in our community, in that we can launch this and it really assists our officers and staff in tracking people, finding people. And you actually are not, you don't have to have the sheer manpower to put a perimeter up. It really does, it is what I just mentioned. It's a force multiplier, and it's been deployed numerous times in our city and actually in the county. We'll go out and assist them sometimes. We did get a live scan printing machine. This was a state of Oregon grant that they offered. This was just rolled out within the last month, and we are taking electronic fingerprints, which is way better than the ink prints that we have been doing for the history of the PD. So this is a big upgrade for us. As you all know, we entered into the agreement with the property owners for the storage of RVs and vehicles that are required under our Oregon Revised Statute and McMinnville Code. Most recently, we were reaccredited through the Oregon Accreditation Alliance. So kudos to our team that put in the work to get us reaccredited. It's a credit to Captain Tim Simons that we were reaccredited really, really quickly through that association. We did promote operations captain. We have a new support services manager, and we have filled the part-time vacancy that you authorized last year with Daniel Ruiz, who's been a fantastic addition to our team. And lastly, in the last fiscal year, we've hired 4 recruit officers to fill vacancies. Next slide. So what's next for Mac PD? Looking forward, you'll probably hear this again and again, probably through HR and fire, as we continue to recruit lateral officers and also new officers. We currently have 6 vacancies. Even with the 4 hirings, we just continue to have a little bit of a churn, whether it's retirements or whether it's people that have gone on to other agencies. But we currently have 6 vacancies. We've got 1 lateral that's in a background with us and another potential hire. But as of right now, we still have a rather large gap in our workforce. Promotions of our new sergeants, as I mentioned, some sergeants have moved on and retired, and others have promoted, so we will be continuing that. We are going to work with our IT partners, Director Burke, to replace several outdated MDTs in our patrol vehicles and continue to explore the updated records management system. Our records management system is about 15 years old, maybe a little bit older, and we know that it's coming to the end of life, and we set aside some time with Brent Galloway, our support services manager, who's going to continue to explore options in that arena. Lastly, these last 2 points are, I think, some of the bigger pieces of the puzzle for MAC. We are going to continue to engage with our community partners surrounding the management of the ongoing houseless crisis in our community. Our involvement, obviously, we're going to always be at the table, but we're just a small piece of an overall objective, and we will continue to have conversations with those partners, whether they're in the county or whether they're our private nonprofits. And also, again, continue to explore partnerships with HHS and other community partners to increase community response teams, those that are dealing with the mental health and addiction crisis. So those are really big bullet points this year, and I hope to check some of these off. I can tell you that I had continued robust conversations with a work group in HHS and other private partners about this community response team, that last bullet point. So those discussions will continue. And the next slide, please. Some challenges for FY 23-24. Again, I'm going to mention hiring is difficult. The pool has shrunk, and I mentioned this last year. The academy training is backlogged 4 to 6 months. Now, recently, the state of Oregon has entered into discussions, and we're fairly certain that they're going to add additional classes. But looking long term, this 4 to 6 month backlog, that will decrease, but with the number of sheer retirements or people moving on from the business of public safety, specifically police, we don't see this trend moving. So again, long-term discussions with DPSST, our training body, is to open up more classes, like I had mentioned, but also maybe a potential expansion of DPSST, the facility itself, and the ability for them to bring on more hiring and more trainers that will allow for those classes to take place. Challenges, again, I'm going to deal in dealing with the houseless community. It's ongoing. You know, I'm going to speak candidly that sometimes the PD seems to be on the front line of this work, and we sometimes feel like we're sort of on an island. And that there's not a ton of coordinated assistance and outreach that we can all pool together. Although we're in those conversations with HHS, County Health and Human Services, and our other partners, we really this is a problem in a community our size. We need to have a more coordinated response. I did ask for some community service officers, 2 to be exact. And we did ask for those in hopes that they would be able to carve work off for the patrol staff to allow for more proactive work to be done by our officers. Obviously, that was not funded, but I think there's going to be a continued ask moving forward. These are community services officers are not trained to the level of police officers, and their training could be quicker than that of a police officer, and they're able to carve off some of the work that our officers are, for lack of a better term, stuck doing, which could be taken care of at a reduced cost and done as efficiently. And we did receive those two vehicles, or we're in hopes of being approved for the additional funding for replacement of 2 patrol vehicles. Our fleet's still aging. When we hold back those funds from the last couple of years, it really puts us in a bind in the coming years. So I believe that that's going to be a problem that continues need to be addressed moving forward through the next budget cycles. And then lastly, although our facility is newer, it is actually 15 years old. So, there are going to be some deferred maintenance that we need to keep an eye out on. So I believe that's my last slide. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yep. And I will be happy to answer questions if you've got any.
Questions? I'm sure there will be some. So let's start. Scott, looks like you have one.
Coming from my experience of being in restaurants, the licenses and permits, I assume some of that, I have no idea how much of that, is the actual OLCC permit that we pay $25 for each licensee. And just knowing that I don't believe that fee has gone up in a very long time. Has that been considered?
You're talking about the annual fees that establishments pay?
$25 annual fee.
Right. I'm sure the city could entertain that and increase cost. It has been 25 for a number of years. And I know we get a great deal. It certainly is a possibility that we can talk with our finance department about whether or not we can set that at a higher rate, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, I just know all of our costs have gone up, and if that one, it's $25 is something that is generally taken care of in one order or so.
Yeah, that's a smoking deal, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
I guess mine would be an extension of that same question. Is your department at full cost recovery on permits and licenses?
I probably, with respect to permitting, the only ones that we are permitting really are, if you're talking about OLCC, are those annual renewals. We haven't baked in any costs, so we are not as probably up to snuff as, say, other departments, specifically Heather Richards' department, and that's certainly something that we can look forward to and change. Candidly, to committee member Cunningham's question, the time it takes to really sign off on those is minimal, because it's a quick review. The cost recovery that we really truly seek is for those large events, those costs, whether it's Cruising McMinnville, whether it's the air show, whether it's Alien Days, we're now going to get some cost recovery off that. Those are the ones that we truly seek full cost recovery on.
So, Chief, I have a question regarding community service officers. What would such a person's role be? And the slide suggested that there could be cost savings. So could you go into that a little bit, please?
So the cost savings is truly, instead of having an officer, a police officer, with roll-ups is, let's just say, $150,000 for a recruit. When we did it, there's a significant cost savings in that we're not paying a police officer to go do things, whether it's taking an information exchange crash, whether it's going out and picking up evidence of something, whether it's taking initial theft reports from local businesses or community members. they can take the small things, and if the follow-up needs to be done by a police officer, that's where that's where the officer will get that follow-up assigned to them. So there's numerous communities that do it, lots up in the metro area, down south. Again, when we have I think a responsibility in our community to try to drive costs down a little bit and be a little smarter. And this is a work smarter, not harder type of solution, in my opinion. This is conversations that we have to have with the McMinnville Police Association, because it does dive into the critical work that those officers would do moving forward. So those conversations need to continue to happen. But that is the model which it works under. They go out, CSOs can do work in the parks, work with the homeless liaison officer, Height, for instance, who we have doing a lot of that work. The thought process is that some of that work can be done and shared by a CSO. That was the thought process behind that.
Thank you.
You bet.
Go ahead.
Victoria?
Thank you, Chief, for your presentation. My question follows up on Chair Hart's. With the community service officers, because you're also having trouble with recruiting officers for the force, would it be easier to recruit community service officers for those, like to fill those positions at least, and especially if it's a cost savings, or is it the police union that's, like, what's the pushback on that?
Well, one is there isn't necessarily pushback. It's the funding, the ability to fund positions such as those. And I think Manager Tower and myself have had conversations about, the ability to get them on the road and trained is much quicker than sending an officer to the academy for 4 months and then 16 to 20 weeks subsequently of training on the road with an officer. The time a CSO would need to be trained is relatively minimal comparatively. And whether or not, you can almost use the CSO as almost a feeder program into those officer positions, those full-time officer positions. Those are certainly conversations that Manager Towery and I have discussed moving forward if we are to move on this at some point in another fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Chair, may I? Thank you. Also, thank you, Chief, for your presentation. I appreciate it. I'm curious about the openings. Are those all patrol or detective? What are those 6 openings right now?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So when we have to shrink our agency to get to the core function, which is patrol, which is our officers in the cars on the road responding, we routinely will have to pull detectives. So we've got 1 or 2 detectives that have been pulled. There are currently 2 vacancies upstairs in detectives right now because we've had to pull them down to the road. We normally would have 2 school resource officers in there. We currently just have 1 at the high school, and the other position is left vacant because they've gone in and they've staffed the road. So, yeah, in crisis, I don't say crisis isn't. When it's difficult to fill those spots, that's how we shrink the organization, is to put those detectives back in the cars responding to emergency calls for service.
Thank you. I have 2 additional questions. So the first one is, years ago, I may be aging myself a little bit, there was a Citizens Academy 15-ish years ago. I don't know if there's potential or even staff for that type of program to continue,
yeah.
because like you mentioned, there's feeder potential.
Yeah, so Citizen Academy is just, again, we shrunk that. In fact, right before I was appointed chief in mid-14. Gosh, I've been doing this way too long. We had stopped doing it, so it was basically a bandwidth issue within our organization, whether or not we could get people in to instruct, for 1 or 2 nights a week. So it was a capacity issue. And to your point, I think it's a great resource that our citizens can have a peek behind the curtain, so to speak. And then also, if people are interested in joining the organization, that's certainly a way to get people's attention and interest.
I would love to see that come back if there's potential. My last question before I say happy 30 years, right? Mayor, 30? Yes.
Yeah, we
It's
took a
not
great
his
photograph.
birthday.
Oh, yes, you're not 30 years old. Although you do look too young to have been working here for 30 years.
Well, thank you. I'll tell my wife that. It's actually, I start 31 July 1. I'm super excited.
Well, congratulations and thank you for your service. Last question, is there potential for charging on the fingerprinting?
So the fingerprinting, are you referring to ballot measure 114?
Well, no, just with the live scanning, like folks having to get their, concealed handgun license, or teachers getting their certifications, or behavioral health workers, fingerprinting is often required.
Yes, that can be cost recovered. Not, again, it would be minimal. It really doesn't take a ton of time, but yes. The CCW permits, those are issued currently by the county. If ballot measure 114 moves out of the court and into our realm, that is going to be an added cost and time. I will tell you why, is because the county has informed us that they will not be doing it for incorporated citizens of McMinnville. So if you live in the city itself, they would not do those types of processes under ballot measure 114.
Okay, thank you.
And yes, within 114, the model, there is a cap, though, on the amount of money that an agency can charge for fingerprints and the background. There's a whole host. This is a very tangled web within 114 that is an unfunded liability for our city. There will be some difficult decisions that we need to make moving forward on how we get that, when that happens, what it looks like for us as a PD.
Thank you. Thank you again for nearly 31 years as well.
Hey, thank you.
Yes, Chief, thank you for your service, and thank you for the report. I'm noticing in here you have not asked for any more employees for 4 years. Is that accurate? Full-time employees?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And
Well, today, I mean, within this budget, we did ask for the CSO position.
yes, but that still gives you a total of 52.31 full-time employees, which is down from 2021, 22. So that means we haven't moved a needle at all in the police department in 4 budgets. Currently we're sitting with 6 vacancies. Did I understand you correctly that when those fill, we'll be able to get another SRO out to the schools?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I think that's it for my questions. Thank you.
Can I piggyback on Councilor Chenoweth's question? Does the 52 allow proactive policing?
So the 52 is sort of, it's 43 sworn. We're authorized for 43 sworn. That includes myself, to our newest officers. And obviously there's command staff that is in there. I will tell you, yes, it will allow for more proactive when we get to 43, when we get to a fully staffed PD. There is some proactive stuff that we can do. There's some creative stuff we can do more of. Is it to the level that probably it needs to be for a city our size? And I mentioned this last year, is that, a city our size should have a traffic team, in my opinion. And that's certainly, it's a money thing. So we talk about this really a lot within our command staff and even into our management team, our sergeants, is what does MACPD look like in 10, 15 years? We got to start planning and making adjustments, and we'll continue to ask budget committees in the city for, additional funding for potential resources. But at the end of the day, I know we all know there's a finite amount of money that's available.
Thank you.
Anything else for the, yes, there is. Go ahead.
Just one more question. On page 181 of the budget, for abandoned RV tows, the professional services went up to $52,500 from $15,000. last year. Is that because of the new policy?
Can you direct me to that budget? I've got my budget open here at home.
It's on page 181,
Okay.
line 7750.
Yes. Oh, the dismantling. Yes. $52,000 to dismantle tow RVs. Yes. City pays a pretty penny for that service. When we do take these in after the 72 hours notice, we do abate them. Sometimes their abatements are quicker than others, but yes, so we're talking like roughly $2,000 to $3,000 per RV and or trailer to dismantle. There's a whole host of problems that arise when we do dismantle, not when we physically do, but when our contractor dismantles it. It's got asbestos. There's a whole host of stuff that they need to work through. So that is a extreme cost to the city and our citizens.
Is that, like, are you towing the same RV multiple times? Like, if somebody gets it out, like, or is it just one time it's towed and then dismantled?
Yeah, so usually it is. It's if an RV is towed and it ends up in our lot, it usually is abated. And when I say abated, that means it will be dismantled, because under our municipal code, it needs to have the person that gets it needs to have insurance, registration, and all that stuff for it. And that's simply not the case. A lot of these RVs and trailers are just handed off, and they're candidly, most of them should be uninhabitable on their own, but so that's the additional cost. It's a super expensive process.
Okay. And it's the new policy, that's why it went up so much, you said?
I think
No,
that
so
to
we
clarify that
we
question.
undershot our budget last year when we requested. We didn't think we were going
okay.
to get that many. And so if you all know anybody that's selling RVs in our city, please ask them to stop.
So I
It
just
is-
clarifying, I think the question is this directly related to the administrative ruling made in our park system? And it is not related to that. And I don't know if this is necessary or wanted at this time, but if desired, perhaps the chief could expand on that overall process that's gone through, because it doesn't just start, it doesn't start at that step. There are a lot of earlier steps to gain voluntary compliance. So I don't know if you have the ability, or I know you have the ability, but if you desire to have a little expansion on that.
I think that would be helpful, or even just like an estimate of, like, how many RVs is that? Like $52,000 is how many RVs?
I would be willing to guess you're in the, probably 15 to 20 range in annual in abatements. The process is pretty, it's a robust process. And to Mayor Drapkin's point, it doesn't start with just the initial towing. It starts with the tagging, the education of those in the vehicles that either can't or won't move their vehicles along in violation of the camping ordinance. We get with our service providers, that'd be YCAP and other partners, to try to provide them some outreach services prior to that. But ultimately, if it's been 72 hours and they have not moved, and granted, please hear me when I say there are times when we are really super, we really try to work with those in this position. I will tell you that. We just aren't towing them at 73 hours. We're really working hard to help them. But at the end of the day, if they are towed, that's the amount of money that we have requested this coming fiscal year for the abatement of those vehicles.
Okay, thank you for the explanation.
You're welcome.
I'm kind of surprised that it's not more, actually, to tell you the truth. That's.
Yeah. Committee Member Hart, I would agree. And our hope is that, Navigation Center be coming online. We're having conversations with our partners, whether it's through HHS, YCAP, the numbers, the sheer numbers don't cause us to go over that $52,000 budget that we requested.
Anything else for the chief?
So Chair Hart, I'll just say in terms of process, we've got one large department presentation and a couple of smaller ones. Do you want to take a short break for the committee, or do you want to just?
I think there's a little bit of restlessness. I think a little break would be a good idea. Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Hey, thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll be online if you need me later.
Chair Hart, what time would you like us back?
10 minutes. So I have 8 till, let's just start again at 8 o'clock.
Sounds great.
Okay, I think we're
Okay.
almost all assembled. We have one budget committee member that is not present. Councilor Chenoweth, so let's go ahead and proceed. Councilor Chenoweth has a question for the chief, if the chief is still on, and that would be Chief Scales.
I'm sorry, I meant to ask this earlier. Is there anything we as a city can be doing more for the fentanyl situation that's occurring both here and in our own community and across the nation? Obviously, we can't do anything across the nation, but for what's happening here, is there anything we can be doing? Is there any uses for the ARPA dollars perhaps that could help in this area that you can maybe, if you don't have an answer for me now, can you come back, circle around with that at some time in the future?
Yeah, I'd be happy to come back to you, Council. That's a massive question. I wish I had an answer. I'll tell you, educating our kids and educating our loved ones about how addicting it is and how dangerous it is. I really wish I could offer more, but give me a moment and give me some time, and I'll be happy to send you, I should say, an email or communication of some sort.
Yeah, please don't shoot me. I
want to do that.
I'm not interested in that, but yes, that would be great. I feel like we need to be doing something, and I appreciate that you put an emphasis on that with one of our dogs.
Chief, do you think you could also talk about the Narcan training that's been happening not only in your department but in other departments, and then also talk about our partnership with the county in terms of their efforts in this area and the different committees essentially that we're joining in order to have a cohesive approach throughout the area, region, county?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say a committee, but I tell you what, Yamhill County Health and Human Services stepped up big time for us, and provided not only training to all city staff, but also have provided Narcan, which is the, I guess for lack of a better, it reverses the effects of fentanyl for our city staff to use if necessary if they encounter that, and somebody that is ODing on fentanyl, and then also they've been really good to us by not charging us for that amount. Fentanyl can be extremely Narcan, can be extremely expensive. And they've stepped up through grants that they've acquired to provide that training and then also the doses.
And then I will say that our state senators are also working on some things that may ultimately provide additional funding. So there's a bill, it's called Mainstreaming Addiction Treatment Act, that was signed into law with the fiscal year 23 omnibus, that will have some effects, and I'd be happy to share this email with the council. And also working on the Non-Opioids Preventive Addiction in the Nation Act, the No Pain Act, which creates a separate Medicare reimbursement pathway for non-opioid pain management. And lastly, the Medicaid Reentry Act, which is a bipartisan bill. It allows medical payment for medical service furnished to justice-involved individuals during the 30-day period preceding the individual's release, including access to addiction treatment. And I think pointing out some of these things is just to say that some of our ability to respond does come down to funding. And I could go on and be happy to share this with additional resources that hopefully will be coming from the federal government.
That'd be great. But that was specifically why I was asking perhaps what we could be looking at with some of this ARPA leftover that we're going to be dealing with. Thank you.
Yes.
Can I just expand a little bit beyond the specific training that police and fire employees have had around deploying Narcan? We've provided training to probably close to 24 other employees who may have cause to use it, and we have Narcan in some of our other facilities. We're also collecting money from the opioid settlement lawsuits over the last couple of years. Jennifer will talk about the magnitude of those dollars. We've actually been holding off on spending those dollars directly because we've been working with the county and other regional partners to see if there's a regional way we can deploy those funds to have a larger impact than just on the community. So they're great questions, and we've got some other opportunities to move that issue forward above and beyond the ARPA funds.
And I know that Health and Human Services is also working on education and outreach into our school districts. And I saw a recent presentation from Director Manfred just showing some of the different graphics and things that are being used and kind of the direction the county was going and the choices they were making. And I have to say that a lot of those choices, they were talking about things that were very real in terms of the way they play out. So as they were looking at some of this advertising going to children, there was, one thing that some other area was using had skull and crossbones on it, and Director Manfred said, we specifically chose not to use this in our programming because sometimes skull and crossbones are seen as being kind of a cool thing. I just said cool in this setting. I like that. Now I lost cool points. Apparently that's cool for kids. Anyways, but it was very intentional, and they were thinking about, that very holistically in terms of how to get engagement in that programming and not just having the programming.
Very familiar with their programming.
Can I add that I think Director Berg and Director Muir were critical in getting the citywide training launched for the staff that did get trained. So it's not just a PD, FD, fire type of stuff. It is affecting everybody. And kudos to the two of them that really spearheaded this, along with Ann Pagano as well. She was in the mix. So thank you.
Thank you. Anything else for Chief Scales? Go ahead.
Well, so while we had our little break, I was still thinking about the CSO question. And I just calculated in the budget for both field operations and investigations, there's $487,051 in overtime budgeted. And we have the 6 open positions, right? And even the budget says that you're estimating that 3 of those won't be filled for the whole year. So is that accurate? There's that much overtime? And the CSO budget line was only $219,000 for 2
for
people.
that ad package.
Would that help with the overtime, reduce overtime?
Not necessarily. A lot of that, it certainly could help. The 3 vacancies that you referenced that Jennifer, Cuellar, and City Manager Towery and I, and along with Rich Lightford, the fire chief at the time, historically we look at trends where we're at, and you really have to, rather than just allocating that money into the budget, understanding that there's vacancy savings that do occur because you are never, or you aren't always realizing those full-time officers for a myriad of reasons. But the overtime is an issue just because of shift coverages and investigative work, court callback, that sort of stuff. Some of that could be mitigated, but I'll be candid with you. It doesn't get mitigated just because you would have CSOs. There's major crimes that happen. There's call-outs, et cetera. So I don't want to belabor the point. I think it could be offset, certainly.
Right. Well, it sounds like the role of the CSOs would be not jobs that require a police officer. So there's, right now, because we don't have any CSOs, the police officers are doing all of that, right? So including going to court and things that, you know, they need to be there for, but also maybe some administrative work that they wouldn't need to be a police officer for.
Yeah, that's correct. That's an accurate
So
assessment.
in that way, wouldn't it help with the overtime?
Some, yeah. Again, some, yes, it certainly would help. To the point of, I couldn't tell you exactly what it would reduce that overtime amount
Right.
with CSOs.
Right. No, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding the role, how they would fit into the plan.
They truly do augment an officer's role. They will take some of the work off their plate as far as the non-emergent calls for service. They can handle some of that stuff, yes.
Right. And the overtime, is that mostly budgeted because you're anticipating not being able to fill those positions?
That's annually sort of where we hit. No, it's not because of that. Some of that is driven by the fact that we do have vacancies, and when we have vacancies, we have to send somebody on overtime to do something or to come in to work. We don't have the flexibility in our workforce, the sheer numbers of officers that it requires to work a shift. So yes, that does cause the cost of that overtime to go up when we do have vacancies. Yes.
Okay. So like, I mean, if we had a bigger budget overall, we would hire more officers so that you wouldn't have to be paying all the overtime, but.
That's the key.
Yeah,
Find that smart number.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Chief Scales, to build on those questions and the overtime, in my recollection, I don't think you've ever asked for an overhire position, and on the fire side, we did do that to alleviate some overtime costs. Is that something that you would consider bringing forward in a budget next year or entertain in the future?
Yeah, I was talking to my counterpart up in Lake Oswego. They have an overhire up there, and I'm like, what the heck is that? In police work, you know. So the ability to have an overhire to that position, because you do see people that are yes. So in short, yes, I would love to entertain that thought and that model. It's, you know, Mr. Towery can attest. It's really tough to get to full staffed PD, especially now hiring. But it certainly could reduce the cost of overtime, yeah.
Is overhired, like, what does that mean?
You essentially you are allocated more resources. So in Lake Oswego's instance, they have an overhire instead of, like, say 50, they have 51 officers. And that position's there to augment when people are on FMLA, whatever it might be.
Okay,
Vacancies.
so they have an extra, like they've hired more officers.
Yeah, so public safety has mandatory minimum staffing levels, and if somebody calls in sick or somebody gets injured, they're now mandated to have staff work overtime to meet those mandatory minimum staffing levels. And so if you have an overhire position that can float around and work for the person that's out on FMLA or the person that's out on a work comp claim or whatever, you're alleviating that overtime cost. And so you're basically net neutral on that hiring position because you would have burnt that cost with mandatory overtime anyways.
Okay. And a CSO wouldn't
No,
qualify
because they're
for
not a
that
sworn
because
officer and they're not through DPSST.
Is some of the overtime that we're talking about also because of major crimes, and you just have a situation where you have more people that have to work later to deal with a major crime event, and that's not something that can be avoided or fixed by having a bunch more staffing?
That's correct, Councilor Chenoweth.
One of the things that we could do, and might be able to bring it back tomorrow, but certainly could just report back to in history, is the type of overtime that a police department generates is usually related to those major incidents. It's typically not for shift coverage, and so you run an amount of overtime even when you're fully staffed based on your major incidents. We could go back and look at when we are fully staffed and show you what overtime looked like in those circumstances, and then how it's changed when we have staffing vacancies.
Any more?
I rest my case.
So we're good? So who is next? Oh, good. We are looking forward to hearing from you, and we will miss you. I'm sorry to say, well, I'm glad to say, maybe, I don't know. Go ahead.
No, I don't think you'll miss me. You'll still see me around, and the department also. I'm coming live from Tennessee this evening, so if I start to break up, Claudia, please buzz me on the phone so I don't keep rambling. You can hear me okay?
We're good.
Okay, thank you. I want to, obviously this is a different budget process and a different budget cycle this evening, driven mostly by the fire department budget and the issues that have occurred with the fire department. I did want to kind of just a 2-minute recap. I know I've got 10 minutes, Jeff. I promise I won't go over 10. Just a 2-minute recap, and I'll start with Councilor Menke from when I first arrived in the department in 2000 and took off in 2009 with all the crazy, wild ideas to find ways to improve the service to the organization. And she's been a counterpart throughout the process.
You go, sir.
Through 2018, when the council decided to move forward with consolidation efforts and the work from 18 to present day to get us to this point. And there are a couple of highlights throughout that time frame that brought us to this point, and a couple of the key components. There was a lot of staff work and a lot of consultant work and a lot of effort and a lot of support by council and previous councils through the process to get us here. And throughout the time, we did some surveys, and the economy changed, and so we ran a second survey to try and determine where we hoped the vote might show up and what it looked like. And quite frankly, between the support from the council and the key support that this transition from Council President Garvin and the Union President Todd Godfrey have done, brought our numbers in slightly higher than the polling numbers that we anticipated, even though the economy has had a downturn. And that just is a testament to the work that they did in the 11th hour, working through all of the citizens in the committee. And I want to take the time to thank them publicly for all the hard work they did in driving us to get to this point. So this is a different one. Claudia, can we change the slide and let's move on. A couple of the things that you're going to see different in this is our Fund 99. It's not in the traditional place it used to be, the budget. We're towards the end of the budget this year because it's an additional fund based on the Fire Department Transition Fund. This is not a full year budget. This fund reflects expenditures that we were in a different world. We were trying to find a mechanism and work with special districts and got recommendations on how we could, if the district was successful, but still they didn't have tax dollars in the bank to do anything. What was the best mechanism that we could come to pull it off to make it successful? Their recommendation and county council's recommendation was to find a mechanism for the city to create a loan to the district and contract with the district for services for 6 months until the tax dollars came in the door, so that the rural district with the tax dollars come in the door could pay back the city and then transition on into the second half of their fiscal year off of the loan and funding themselves through their tax dollars and their revenues in the door. So what you see in your budget this evening in the Fund 99 is a 6-month budget for what would have been traditional operating costs had we still been a city department. Their revenues are showing some fees for services, for ambulance services, and a district payment to the city from taxes in December. They also show the city charges to the district. All of the line items that you see in Fund 99 are going to be charged to the district. Their expenses paid out so we can run the business, but they're also going to be charged to the district, and the district will pay those back as soon as they have the tax dollars in the bank at the end of the year. Next slide, please. It covers first operating 6 months. It covers IS costs for separation from the city. So those would be any of the costs associated with starting up our own website, software products, getting the station up to stand alone with its own internet, completely breaking away and separating and making our own IS function independent and autonomous for the most part from the city. to Councilor Menke's question, it does cover the transition of the YCOM fees that were dedicated and allocated to fire and EMS for the city also. It covers city charges for support of the organization in finance, administration, HR, and IS staff. And it also covers, as I indicated, all of the expenditures that you see in Fund 99 are for the first 6 months of FY24 for the duration of that loan and that contract with the rural district. Next slide, please. The fees for service that you'll see in the revenue side are some of the ambulance fees that we currently collect, the fees, fire fees, and the miscellaneous fees, as well as a loan from the district from wastewater reserve account to supplement the fees for service required that we don't have the capacity to raise. Then the loan plus interest will be repaid by the district when the taxes are deposited from the taxing from the county. One of the things that you will see coming down the pipe in the beginning of June will be an ambulance fee increase, and that is figured into the revenues within the budget system. So there'll be council action and request for fee increase to increase the rates to match the CPI that's occurred in this last year, and that is figured into the revenues on the backside. Next slide, please. The other things and priorities that we'll be working through for 23-24, Jeff spoke to them a little bit. We'll be figuring the transfer of the staffing from the city to the rural district. Our goal is to try and make that transfer occur in January 1st, largely due to the insurance challenges of trying to start and stop healthcare insurances and those types of things. There's the facilities transfer of Station 1 and the training area lease. The capital equipment transfers, support services, which support services, and IGA for services between the city and the rural district as the process moves on past into the second 6 months of the fiscal year. So those are some of the transitional actions that will need to occur between the city and the rural district as in the first 6 months to prepare for the second 6 months of the fiscal year. Next. Because this fire department will continue to be the fire department for the city of McMinnville. I also wanted to touch on some of the achievements that your budget direction helped us work on last year. We had some significant efforts to improve our fire and EMS services. We're currently still working to improve recruitment and retention. Some of the improvements that we had that actually directly impact services based on budget authority. Last year, there was the authorization of the 24-hour, 7-day BLS ambulance. We modified our response model. We added a fourth 24-hour ambulance into the system. We also added a peak unit Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And by adding those 2 units into the system, we've increased the availability of our EMS units by 30% in the system as we're sitting currently. We're reducing the need to rely on neighboring partners right now as a result of those increases. We've improved response services to the service area. And we've also, as a result of some of those improvements, we've taken on one of the new ambulances that was authorized in the budget this year. We've just taken delivery of it. It's not quite in service yet. And the ARPA-funded ambulance, due to, we'll just call them supply chain issues, won't be coming in until the next fiscal year, but it's been ordered for a significant period of time. So that will be coming in to help offset some of the older ambulances and move them into the reserve capacity. And then we're going to continue to work on partnerships to identify locations to deploy EMS units for interim solutions until the substations can be developed by the new district. Next slide, please. As with PD and MATS challenges, we continue to have recruitment and retention challenges. We currently have 5 vacant positions. The workload is pretty significant due to those vacant positions, or insufficient staffing. Mandatory overtime creates morale issues and challenges. Some of the applicant pools are the lowest we've seen ever in the fire service. It's just terrible. We're competing against larger agencies that are recruiting hundreds of positions due to growth and retirement. We're all seeing the end of the retirement of the 80s firefighters and public safety officers that were hired in the 80s due to the growth, and now we're struggling to fill those vacancies. The colleges are still struggling to get applicants for paramedic programs. So it's a nationwide challenge, but it's particularly impacting on McMinnville also. So, next slide, please. And I think that was it. And I'll open it for questions.
Chair, may I?
Please.
Thank you. It looks like there's no SCBA's in here.
So we moved the SCBA grant to the second half of the fiscal year. So you would not see it in the first half. You will not see it in Fund 99, but the rural district does have it allocated in the second. It's a grant application. We have not received the grant, but the grant application funding and revenue was moved to the second half of the fiscal year.
Thank you.
More comments, questions, please?
Okay, it's like almost midnight here in Tennessee. Somebody better ask me a question.
How's McMinnville, Tennessee?
You know, I drove by it, and I've been driving through torrential downpour thunderstorms here last night when we flew in, so I didn't get a chance to stop and visit this time.
Any more questions? We'll let the chief go to sleep. Is that the idea?
Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to throw a little wrench in the schedule. I'm going to move up and present prior to the municipal court. So I hope everybody's okay with
I consented, just so you know.
All in favor? So for those of you that don't know, my name is Vicki Hedges, and I am the HR manager here with the city. I joined in September of 2022, so I've been here for most of this fiscal year, and I'm happy to report out some successes that we've been able to accomplish in HR. Right now, we actually have all of our full-time positions filled, with the exception of police and fire, which you've heard both chiefs speak about, and then our city attorney position. This year, we also were able to renegotiate rates with our HRIS provider, NeoGov. That wasn't a direct savings, but did allow for more functionality from that software so that we can start to improve efficiencies around the city. That functionality also allowed us to really streamline our recruitment processes, which alleviates some of the work on our departments, and then also creates efficiencies for our applicants applying for jobs. Some of that work also included partnering with a third-party agency for advertising our positions. They post our jobs on job boards at no additional cost to the city, and also provide us recommendations for where it might be good to post our jobs, specifically related to DEI, which has been helpful in this process as well. Prior to our last HR manager, Kylie, leaving the city, she started the work to implement NeoGov Onboard, which is a program that allows our new hires to complete paperwork online instead of doing that on their first day, and also provides them with some crucial policy review and processes that they need to complete as a new hire right away, and that's done online. So we were able to launch that program this year. That helps the new hires, and also, of course, creates capacity in the department so they're not focusing and spending their time on that work. It also creates more secure transfer of information because we're not putting that information on paper and passing it around the city from building to building.
So looking forward into this next year, thank you, Claudia, we'll be focusing on succession planning. We'd like to have a tool for all city departments to use to start developing succession plans for our key positions, but hopefully that could be used for any position at the city. We'll also be implementing more of that NeoGov functionality that I just mentioned in the coming year, most specifically related to electronic workflows for current employees. So we have the functionality now for new employees, but this will expand that functionality for current employees as well. Also looking to implement consistent training programs. There are various state and federal laws that require us to train our employees on certain topics annually or biannually. So we're going to put some systems in place to ensure that our employees are trained on those topics as required by the laws. Also this year, we will have an updated employee handbook. I don't think there's been an official update since 2001, so that was my one major goal when I started here. I'm hoping to have that done before it's been a year with the city. We're also working on policy and procedure improvements and documentation for both supervisors and employees. This work really, the goal is to make it easy for employees to find information and supervisors so that they know what to do when certain things happen. Things like FMLA, workers' compensation, recruitment, all those kinds of things. Creating consistent documentation will help in that process. And then the last thing is implementing paid leave Oregon. That is the new law passed by the state to provide our employees with paid leave. That's set to begin in September 2023, so we're working to make sure we get that program implemented here at the city. As both chiefs mentioned, our challenges in the coming year are, again, recruitment and retention. They specifically were talking about police and fire, but it's important to note that applicant pools for city government or local government, any government positions, are the lowest they've been in years across the nation. The interest in government employment is not as high as it used to be. So that's something that we're battling nationwide. I have a couple stats here specific to police and fire. McMinnville Fire lost about 50% of their workforce in 22-23. They filled some of those positions, but there's still 4, I think Rich just mentioned 5 vacancies in the fire department. Chief Scales mentioned that there are 6 vacancies in the police department. This is probably the area that nationally there's the resistance or lack of applicants is highest. This data here is national data showing that total sworn staffing has dropped 5% over the last 3 years, and also there have been 50% more resignations in 2022 than in 2019, and 20% more retirements in 2022 than in 2019. And again, the Chief Scales mentioned that we are seeing those same trends here in the city. So those are national trends that we are seeing here happen locally. The goal first is to get people in the door, and then of course to retain those employees. There's a lot of work that can be done. There's obviously not a simple answer, otherwise we wouldn't be having this struggle as a nation, but there is work that we can do. So some of the things that I've been working on and will continue to is to really support and grow the mental health and wellness initiatives across the city. Reviewing pay and benefit packages. This does not mean a comp study. Again, I know we just went through that, but for example, we have a hiring bonus right now for our police, things like that, reviewing what is it that is preventing applications from coming in. And then benefit packages as far as we have EAP providers, we have wellness initiatives. Are we really providing the right benefits for our employees? I also mentioned earlier that we're working on succession plans, some template for that. The hope with this
related to retention is that when we have succession plans in place, employees know how they can grow through the organization, and we can start to help them reach those career goals, which creates higher engagement and retention. And then the other thing I have listed here is to review our recognition programs. Employees generally feel more engaged when they are recognized and appreciated for their work. So that would be on the plate as well. Questions?
I have a question. I know this is your first year, but do you have a sense of when folks do resign from here, do they leave for other cities to work, or do they leave city government entirely?
In my time here, it's generally other cities.
I do have a quick question. Are you doing the entire administrative department as your report here?
Yeah.
What's the increase of almost 2 employees? What are those for? Specifically?
So do you want to jump into the admin presentation first, or and then do questions?
Yeah, let's hold that one. We'll, some of that will get covered in the initial presentation, but we'll make sure we answer that question in the context of the full budget.
I have another slide deck. For admin, not HR specific. Go ahead, Kelly.
Do you do de-escalation training across the staff?
Not currently.
Are you thinking about it maybe in the future?
Yeah, so in that work of the training program, there is the required trainings, but there's also going to be a look on what do our staff need that's not just required for compliance. So that's definitely some work will be going into what does the city need for training.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Right.
Thank you.
On to the next. Right. Go ahead to the next slide, Claudia. Thank you. So in both budgets, you will see listed $24,000 in City Hall capital projects, which is funded through internal borrowing, and this has been in there. You'll see an increase due to the increase in cost for repairs and maintenance that's just happening through inflation. The funds to support the downtown art program have been increased by recent private donations, so you'll see that as well. You'll also see an increase to the contributions to Yamhill County Transit Authority and McMinnville Economic Development Partnership. And those were increased just, again, related to inflation. Next slide, please. With the fire district hopefully passing, the city has hopes to hire an additional 2 staff, one for additional human resources capacity, and then the other a temporary limited duration position to help with the transition to the fire district. Regarding MacTown 2032 and the work that's being done on that, the city manager and the executive team are continuing to work with council to find sustainable funding mechanisms to move the city's strategic mission plan and vision forward. I added some extra words there, sorry. And then we are still working to fill the city attorney position. We did recruit for that. We had a full recruitment process and we were unsuccessful with an offer, but we are still looking to fill that position. We wanted to take some time and assess our needs as a city and make sure that we are getting the right applicant pool when we're advertising. And then for the ARPA funds, the American Rescue Plan, this year, the focus will be on translation and non-English language community engagement and support of the DEI activities.
Questions?
On the
city attorney, I understand, will probably be going out for another attempt at hiring around July-ish. Right. And then I think I answered my own question reading in here. But my question was based in understanding the cost differential to the city between having somebody on staff versus having this host of contracted attorneys. And I did note that you, or that in the overview here, it does say that vacancy savings and contracted costs will most likely offset each other. Would you say that's what you kind of project over the next few months while we hire or is that what has been happening historically, so that they more or less offset one another?
Jeff, do you want to?
Sure. For the most part, yes. It's a little more nuanced in terms of the contract services. We've also taken on some short-term, very specific projects that we've been using special counsel for, renegotiating franchises with Ziply and Comcast, working with the environmental issues that have been raised in some of the downtown properties regarding underground leaking storage tanks, that sort of thing. So we've got some special short duration contracts. We've also been spending a lot of time and money on outside counsel for land use, and that is mostly application driven, and it's a little bit harder to predict, but it's been a higher than normal expense for outside services for land use in particular as well. So we think that some of those contract costs will sort of mitigate just because we'll be done with projects or we'll be moving on. And then the general counsel contract cost should be mostly offset by the hiring of a new position.
Okay, and none of those costs get sat entirely within the department. So the land use attorney, that goes into planning or administration?
It's been a mix. So some of those special projects have actually been charged in contracts in admin. Land use costs have been mostly borne by community development, while we have not had to do it when we use outside counsel for labor issues, for instance. That gets charged either to police or fire because that's where our organized labor costs are. So some of those costs are charged out directly. Some of them are borne in the admin budget.
Thank you.
So just to add a little bit of color, at your next council meeting, there will be an FY23, the current budget, a supplemental budget request on your agenda. And one of the items that we will be asking for additional appropriations is precisely in admin for these unusual legal fees that have come across our transit this fiscal year, which are particular to what Jeff just described. So this legal spend this year has been unusually high. Next year, the projection is the combination of outside counsel, which will continue to have particular needs, and the new hire, we are anticipating will be lower than it's been this year. But, I'll use the knockwood here. We don't run into, similar big needs next year.
So when you hire the attorney, when that happens, will you still farm out the narrow specialties like land use, those type of things?
So we'll
environmental, typically a city attorney's not going to be able to do the really tough environmental law, land use, some other subspecialties.
Yeah, historically what we've contracted out for are labor relations and employment law. City prosecutor function is a contract service, and land use was typically contracted out as a result of workload. So if there are lots of land use things going on, even an experienced city attorney with land use expertise may not be able to handle all of the volume. And some mix of those services would continue to be provided through contract, at least in the short term with the new city attorney. But we wouldn't be contracting out for general counsel activities very often.
May I go? So following back up with my question, I heard you say we have a full-time finance ad and a half-time transition for the fire department ad. Did I hear that correctly?
Full-time HR and then a transition support for the fire district.
Okay. So then under the finance department, which is still coming, there's a full-time ad there.
Correct.
And that's
A
not what she's
limited-
referring to at all.
Right, so.
Okay, I'm
of
good.
the-
That answers
the-
my question.
Okay,
You can keep going, but I got what I was confused on.
so there are 5 net position ads in this budget scenario. 2 are limited duration associated with the fire transition, 1 sitting in the admin department and 1 sitting in the finance department. And then the other 3 true, added capacity for core services here at the city. There's the 1 position in HR and then 2 positions that 1 staffer and then a full-time equivalent of extra help, which would likely be several people, is in the park maintenance budget, but it's for getting the facilities moving forward.
Yeah, to be clear, and I wasn't trying to cut you off, we've had a couple of conversations through ARPA and different times of asks to add into the administration side of this, and I just wanted to make sure that wasn't happening as part of this. So that was all I was getting clarity for. Thank you.
If your cost shared citywide for employee training, materials and events, or employee events, this is 7540 on page 89. It's $300, and I know the individual departments have their own trainings into their individual budgets, but I'm a little confused by how low this number is. That's $1 a person essentially a year. And so I just want to understand kind of where what these employee events are that are different than others, and then so that I can figure out how, it's a very small line item number. It's $300, but also it just doesn't make any sense to me that you could do anything.
We can answer that. So so you went to the employee breakfast this morning?
I did.
Part of that $300 in HR was HR's share of that event. So there's some things we do citywide that we spread the cost across all of the departments based on the size of the department. And since HR is 1 person, the stuff that happens that's citywide and gets charged out is really the cost associated with the position in the FT. It's not service provided to the whole organization.
Got it.
And then to follow up, Remy, part of the ARPA funds paid for some training support, so this year we won't necessarily have to have additional training costs tied to the general fund because the ARPA funds have funded a training program that will meet multiple purposes, so we won't have additional costs this year related to full city training.
Thank you.
Mayor. Thank you. My first question is, and forgive me because I'm still the new kid, page 81, your travel, Jeff, is that just city manager travel, or does that include ICMA travel?
So the travel associated with my service for ICMA is paid for by ICMA. So the travel and training budget for the city manager is above and beyond that. So when I go to the annual conference for ICMA, the city pays that cost. When I'm going to board meetings or other duties as president of ICMA, ICMA either pays that cost directly or reimburses the cost for that.
Thank you for clarifying. And then I had one other question. I'm all for arts and culture, but 26,000 for downtown art.
What page?
Oh, sorry, forgive me. Page 93.
That's related to the donations that we'll receive for that public art.
So this is a separate line item.
We also contribute about, which
10,000 is our normal city kick-in for that, out of the general fund dollars.
and typically that's related to either repair of existing art pieces or installation of existing art places. So, for instance, if we get a new statue, some of that $10,000 might be used to build the concrete base that statue sits on.
Okay, so what's the difference between 8012.5 and 8012.10 when they both reference 6490? I guess I'm confused by the account numbers and how they communicate with one another.
There is a category of dedicated, which my perception of that is that it must be tied to restricted donations as opposed to just general dollars that may come in. So so it would be similar to if someone donated money and some might be, I want you to spend this on buying a new green chair. And that would be restricted versus, hey, I love what you're doing, here's $10, spend it how you will. That's my perception of why those two exist.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't know who would answer this question, but page 92, line item 8010, holiday lighting. This upcoming year, we're at 38,600. Year before, we were at 14,000. Year before that, we were at 37. Year before that, we were at 13,000. What's happening there?
So I have done some investigating on these things too. And so the reason why it was high the year before was, I guess every 3 years, they do a replacement of this bulbs on that super big tree. And so that's why every 3 years there tends to be, a significant jump. The reason why next year is higher, if I recall correctly, it's because several of the banners that we use on 3rd Street have really reached end of life, and so there are funds there.
That's the $4,000 banners?
Yes.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay.
Get the squirrels to stop chewing on the strings of light.
When you say that big tree, do you mean the largest living lit tree on the western United States?
Our Sequoia Pride tree.
I believe it's the spruce tree, perhaps?
Sequoia.
We don't, we're not going to kill Christmas, okay? This budget share will not.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to stop Santa Claus from coming to town. I was just curious.
I was curious too, Adam. Thank you, or Councilor Garvin, for asking the question, because I know, I think Development Director Richards had just mentioned that they extended the strands, and then they had just done a bunch of replacement. So I guess it makes sense to rotate out the banners or our archaic bells.
Yeah, this is actually would be a great time to also just note, I think it was organized through the McMinnville Downtown Association, but there were a large number of downtown business owners and folks that came together to restring or to replace the bulbs in those lights this year in order to be able to make that happen. So it was a really great community effort to undertake that project, which
now it's lit all the way to the top.
Now it's lit all the way to the top?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the first time in 40 years.
And I also think it would be lovely to point out the great partnership we have with the arborists that do the tree climbers that do the work of hanging those lights, and the little bit of extra holiday cheer that they brought this year when they sent the Grinch to hang the lights.
Oh,
I don't know if you saw those photos, but they're fun.
Well said. Anything else? Okay, are we moving on to the court supervisor? Good.
Just set my timer here so I know what's going through. My name is Jason Carbajal. I'm a municipal court supervisor. I am not brand new, but I'm still fairly new. I'm about 15 months into my time here with the city of McMinnville. I will echo what Director Berg talked about with instability within the department to begin my tenure here. So as I took this position, we had vacancies at the judge's position, which Judge Coffin Noble served for a number of years preceding my time here. We have a new HR director. I guess, you know, Kylie left shortly after that. We had a city attorney leave. We had, well, the supervisor that preceded me was a city employee for 15 years. So experience really ran out the door when I came in and I started beginning thinking I was the problem. So really, I will also echo Director Berg's comments about stability being installed within the last year, with just kind of the environment changing, with COVID kind of being something that wasn't so prominent, with services reopening to the city. So if you want to go to the next slide, Claudia. Basically what my job was to do coming in was to really restore relationships that had maybe been not necessarily neglected, but just not able to be fulfilled because of the COVID restrictions. So we really emphasized our partnerships with our community partners. So Yamhill County Behavioral Health, provide mental health services to defendants in our court, and just continuing our partnerships with places that want to help people that are going through our courts. So Provoking Hope, YCAP, we partnered with Yamhill County Work Crew again that we haven't had done for some time. And not just because he's sitting here to my left, but Judge Poole came in at that same time with me and has been instrumental in a lot of the programs that we're attempting to begin to work with the municipal court. And Chief Scales has been wonderful, and Captain Fessler has been great to work with. Our city prosecutor is great to work with. So we're really harboring good relationships throughout all of our partners and people that we work with directly. We've made really big inroads with the Yamhill County Jail, where we were having some struggles with having arraignments and things at the jail. So again, we're just really focused on the partnerships and getting the municipal court to be a real cornerstone of the city, and really an organization that the city can rely on for stability. You know, we started to offer jury trials again after the COVID-19 restrictions dropped, what we hadn't done for some time. So just to focus on civil liberties and people being able to see a judge and get a trial if they so choose. That is a success of our last fiscal year, and we hope to do that again next fiscal year. ARPA has been a big part of our work that we've done. We've been able to reduce the backlog of cases. We've been able to staff a .40 FTE court clerk to help us with some of the backlog and work that's been piling up. If you've been in City Hall, you can see that the remodel work in City Hall is complete. That's an ARPA-funded project. So that's the solid core door, the glass between us and the customer, just really a big security measure for the court staff. And then City Hall is just open to municipal courts again, court customers again, so people can come in and actually see somebody instead of having to call or email. So that's been a big success. I would say that next slide, please, sorry. I would say that our priorities for the next fiscal year is just continuing to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion. Myself and one other court clerk, Freddie Vargas, are Spanish speaking, and we are able to help people who aren't able to speak English or who speak Spanish in our court system. So that's a big advantage. And then again, Judge Poole wants to do a community court, and I'm behind that as well. And so we're going to do mental health, behavioral health court, and that's partnering with Yamhill County Behavioral Health, having them attend our court hearings and just be a big integral part of that. This goes really, I don't have enough time to talk about it, but aid and assist issues are big for a lot of our houseless community and a lot of our mentally ill people who we see in our court. Aid and assist is something that they're not able to properly defend themselves in court, so we have a plan to try to work with Yamhill County Behavioral Health to work on that specifically. And then again, just maintaining all of our community partners and relationships, even with our city departments. It's a big deal to have support and be able to rely on our other departments within the city. Next slide, please. I would say that the challenges for this fiscal year and maybe going forward is just challenges due to lack of sustainable resources. Oregon law, which the legislature has made some things where some crimes can't be charged, and some driver suspensions and fines that we were able to collect before aren't able to be enforced either. So that's something that handcuffs the, no pun intended, handcuffs the court a little bit. So we've had a little bit limited arraignment times available to the municipal court for adults in custody at the Yamhill County Jail, which we're working on. We're trying to do something maybe technology-based to be able to help us in that regard. With our .40 FTE through ARPA, that's helped our staffing levels. We'd like to see that stay in the coming fiscal year. So that helps us with just the new court proposals that we have that we want to develop with the community court and things of that nature. And then we work with a historic software system in the municipal court. We would like to have a new revamp to better serve our community with a new operating system if just in the future. We would like, that's on our wish list. If we're talking about Christmas, that's our Christmas wish. But yeah. Next slide, please. That's it. Thank you.
Questions? Go ahead.
Thank you. Could you talk a little more about community court?
Yeah, community court is taking a different approach to things. We have habitual offenders who maybe a lot along the lines that Director Berg was talking about just misbehavior and things that maybe rise above that level to the criminal nature, the criminal trespassing, the disorderly conducts, the things that we see the same people cited and not appearing at court, which causes a failure to appear, which causes a warrant to be signed, which causes the police to recite to us. And it's just a cycle where a lot of people are handling a lot of paperwork and nothing is getting necessarily handled in those sort of cases. So community court is something where if somebody, we look for alternatives in sentencing. So a $400 fine to somebody who doesn't have a home is not reasonable in the sense that that money is ever going to get paid to us. So we have work crew where we can send people to work for the day to try to help Yamhill County out. We have other alternatives where if that person reaches a level where they are incarcerated, we do we just offered this to our first defendant where we sent a letter to the jail where if that person participates and does an intake and an assessment with the Yamhill County Behavioral Health, we will give them credit for 1 day served for 1 day's worth of treatment. So we're trying to do things outside of the box where it's not necessarily the usual, where it's a fine, where it's probationary matters. It's really the fact where we want these folks to reach out for help, go get help through the community partners that we have, and just really know that we are trying to find alternatives to solutions that have not been working for quite a while now. And I mean, everybody who's been down 3rd Street knows by name some of the folks that we're dealing with, and we really are trying to make a big impact with some of these things, because really, Chief Scales talks about how they're just the tip of the iceberg with some of the enforcement stuff, but we see it a lot, and there's a lot of, those problems touch a lot of different departments, not just the court or the police. It's really a citywide problem.
Yeah, it sounds a lot more rehabilitative than punitive, but it also sounds like it saves resources, because you're not like trying to collect a fine that you're never going to collect, or just re-fining somebody. You're actually...
That's correct. And if you saw the graph at the beginning of the presentation, the municipal court is 2% of the budget. We're a small department, so we really have to find ways to be creative and find ways to make big impacts with maybe not as much resource.
I can't find it right now, but I saw, and I remember marking it both times when I went through, for when you are, there was a note about a limitation on being able to assign work crew, and then there was some things that changed at the state this year in regards to that. So I have this kind of a big open-ended question, but I'm wondering if you can address kind of the two parts of that, and then the extension of it then would be, I know that our code compliance officers have been doing some volunteer management for graffiti cleanup and things of that nature. Is there opportunity there to work with code compliance and community court for those types of, that type of work in the community as well?
So yes, to address the first part, so work crew was something that wasn't available to us for a while because Yamhill County cut the contract with the city of McMinnville because they just didn't have enough participants to be able to staff a work crew. So we, I should say, Judge Poole really initiated us really wanting to revamp the work crew, and so we were able to do that. We had a great meeting over there. We were able to meet with their administration and get us back on the program where we're offering defendants work crew days here versus community service or jail. On a lot of crimes, we'll do 48 hours worth of jail sentence, or we'll do, say, 2 days of work crew. And so that's been working out really well. So that is something that is now available again to us and other city departments. So yes, I believe that we had a meeting with Director Pagano about some of these things where they wanted some of our participants from the work crew to be able to do some city projects. Yamhill County was not able to offer that yet. They said their program isn't big enough to. So we are trying to address the issue. They just don't have enough, I guess they don't have enough participants in the work crew to be able to offer to other services. So far right now it's just, I think it's landscaping for the most part that most of our participants do, or park cleanup.
Thank you.
You mentioned the temporary position funded by ARPA, and my understanding was that we funded that to help with the backlog, but you commented that you're worried about when that position goes away, when it's not funded anymore. So will there still be a backlog that hasn't been taken care of, or you just feel like there is always a need for more staff?
I guess there's two issues there. So the first one I would say is that the ARPA project that we greenlit was backlog, but it also was the revenue part of it, because we have so many cases that aren't followed up on for collections and things of that nature. So that staffing person frees up. That staffing person does tasks that they're trained for, so that allows our senior clerk, which I would like to also publicly really give a kudos to Susanna Branson. She is a 16-year municipal court employee who does an exceptional job for us. And so she's able to do other things when that newly hired person is able to take care of some of the day-to-day stuff. She's able to do some more of the collections or follow-ups or things that need to be done that aren't necessarily, greeting customers to the door or on a court day or something like, some other routine part of our job. And then, I'm sorry, I addressed the first part. Tell me the second part again.
Will there still be a backlog, you think, when this position is done?
Yeah, I do believe that we are staffed at a point where we really get creative and cross-train everybody to be able to do what we do. So there always will be work for the municipal court to do with the current staffing level, yes.
And just to clarify, we have a part-time position historically in the municipal court, and the ARPA funds allowed us to bump that to full-time. So we didn't hire a part-time person to do the work. We grossed up the hours so that existing employee, also new employees, working full-time, part of it funded by ARPA, working on the backlog.
To build on the conversation you just had, where are we right now with collections? I know at one point in time we had a tremendous amount of past due stuff, and then the state wiped a lot of that stuff out. Are we staying caught up on that? And do we have a general turn of our AR, or is it just continuing to build again?
Well, the governor's remission order that wiped out $120-some thousand worth of fines and fees owed to the court, while that is a big number, it also brought fines and fees to the forefront in the sense that people would call us and they'd say, I'm good now, right? I got my remission order. And we'd look on the spreadsheet that the governor's office provided and we'd say, no, you weren't a participant, or, you weren't eligible for whatever reason. We didn't make the criteria, the governor's office did. So when that person then said, then what do I do? And we'd say, well, Western Collection Agency has your account. We need you to reach out to them and you can work out a payment plan. We've been starting to see collections come in at a higher rate than we had before that. So in the sense that my first opinion of the remission order was that it was going to be detrimental to some revenue. What it really has done is brought some people who we may have not seen come out of the woodwork to address some of the issues. And so we are seeing Western Collection Agency really bring us some funding that we hadn't seen in the past.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask 2 questions? The first is, have any grants through the Community Justice Commission been explored for the community court?
The only one that I have looked into is for software. I've been really trying to find anything that will allow us to upgrade our software system. So that is, as far as operating costs or anything day-to-day, no. But yes, in the sense that looking for a grant for that has been explored.
Okay. I guess I should have clarified. I was asking more for the community court specifically because the grant supports specialty court programs.
Yeah, so we're just barely pioneering it. We're just piloting it. So I don't have an expectation of what to know the costs or what the impact will be on our normal docket and our normal court system. So I would say that yes, that is in the background, but it's not at the forefront necessarily right now of my focus.
What's the cost? And the second question is related to the software that you're considering, and what is the software and like the cost, and is it, the issue with technology is it's outdated as soon as you get it. Is there a risk with it?
So yeah, the vendor that we have been keyed in on for a number of years, even prior to my time here, and I used it at my prior employer. I worked for the Oregon Judicial Department before the city of McMinnville, is a company named Tyler Technology. They offer a municipal court software. I think probably round trip, we're talking $60,000.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So, finance budget, so you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So, in terms of what we've been up to this year and where we've been able to see some progress is we have been reorganizing ourselves a little bit internally to try to add more capacity for being able to serve analytical needs. So we're not there yet where we want to be, but we're covering ground in that direction. Some concrete things that we've gotten done this year are we will be putting our excess cash into some higher return bank accounts at no higher risk in terms of, relative where they are now. So that will earn the city some extra money from interest. We've been working on the city services charge and getting all of those business processes together, and we've still got more work to do in that area. We're also trying to help out in terms of citywide, getting information out and providing more tools around purchasing and procurement, because that's a real technical specialty that we just don't have a person who has that skill set on staff yet. It's one of those things that everyone needs, right? We also have this year working on the cable franchise renewal. That's been a little bit of time and an unusual activity in terms of year-to-year type things. So those are some of the things we've gotten done. In terms of the American Rescue Plan Act, I think we've done a good job getting our infrastructure built in the first year, although I'm not sure whether I've mentioned in council meeting, I don't think I have, but our limited duration staffer for ARPA relocated to the East Coast. And so we're looking for alternative ways to meet that need. But now that kind of the infrastructure is built, it feels like it'll be hopefully a fairly straightforward process to be able to bring in some other consultants. We're also talking with the COG, I think tomorrow even, about what alternatives they may have. So we're trying to figure that piece out now. And we have signed our contract for the project in the finance department that was ARPA funded to get a forecasting application. And so we haven't had the chance to play with it much because we've been focused on this 1,200 pages worth of fun. But that will be coming soon, we hope. And so that should give us a little bit more visibility in terms of when we're making choices. I think it'll be important for the $1.50 conversation that we will be embarking on, being able to really tease out different paths and what financial trade-offs or implications might mean if we decide to do Plan A versus Plan B versus Plan C on, all kinds of ways we might put those, scarce resources to work here at the city. So next slide. So in terms of next year, and starting tomorrow probably, standing up the financial systems and the back end and acting as the finance department for the new fire district will be a big part of what we're doing, which is why we are needing to bring on more staffing capacity for a limited duration to be able to keep things going at the city while at the same time standing up and then staffing the financial back-end needs of the district. We also, it's been on the, we'd really love to give you all a quarterly financial reporting package, and so that's still on the list. So we'll see how all of these things, play. A lot will depend on how successful we are at getting the financial system set up for the fire district. We're also looking at continuing to add more efficiencies, and which typically will also strengthen our internal controls by leaning on our existing software, more and more. So we always prioritize training and those kinds of things for staff so that we can take advantage of what we already own to best effect. Let's see, the city services charge, what I would really like to be able to spend time on in the next year is building out a more comprehensive low-income program associated with the city services charge. I think it's something we can do. We just need to have the bandwidth to be able to focus on it and work with partners to figure out the best way to do that. Then in terms of the American Rescue Plan Act, we will be figuring out the grant management transition and focusing on the implementation of our forecasting software. So that's what's ahead. In terms of challenges, on the next slide, I think we really in finance are working at a base level. And so what that means is when things come up, the things we would like to do get pushed. And so, and it happens with every department. We just don't have, I like the overhire concept. There's just not an extra person. If one person is sick and someone else has got a vacation, well, then you're behind on AR and or payables, and it just cascades in a month, and you don't get nearly as far as you hoped with what your plans were. Let's see, I think the other challenge is we're not able to support our departments in ways that we really would like to in terms of the financial implications of their plans. And it's come up tonight with the police department. Could we help maybe look at their cost recovery systems of, some revenue streams? There just are things that we could be doing to be helpful around the organization if we had a little bit more bandwidth. Let's see. We're wanting to continue to support the ongoing discussions of the sustainable financial footprint, the $1.50, how that is deployed, how we want to be strategic with that. I don't know, maybe there are other things. I get cold calls all the time, right? Well, how about paid parking systems? Or, there are all kinds of different projects that potentially could bring in revenue that we might want to be considering in the future, and we want to be able to be forward thinking with those kinds of things. And then, as mentioned, just fitting in, doing the fire district support with keeping things going well at the city. It's going to be challenging, but we've got a really good team who's working really well together, I think. So, knock wood, everyone stays on board, and we have a stable year, at least from a staffing perspective, for the next year or more. So that's finance department. Oh, well, I guess this is just details if you wanted to. It was pulled out of the budget book. Yeah, so I'm essentially done here. So that just points out what the where those numbers are and what the differences were driven by.
Ready for questions?
Yes, indeed.
So I had a question. A couple of your slides mentioned the city services charge. One said getting it off the ground. Seems like it's off the ground because it's.
Correct, but there's a back office component of it that if there are any, if any payers are in arrears more than 2 months, Mac Water and Light sends us their information. So we have to create a business process to be able to keep that rolling.
That's what you meant by a business process. So,
Correct.
so these are people who haven't paid their entire water and light bill, including the service charge. Is that right?
Correct, yeah, it's a detailed issue, but there's an order of payment, right, and city services charges last, and there were, I think, completely legitimate concerns about wanting to make sure that no one was set to be cut off for their utilities because they hadn't paid their city services charge. So, but at the end of the day, what's ending up happening is, you know, if people haven't quite finished their bill, well, we're fourth, so the 4 cents they owe come to us. So we're trying to figure out the rhythms and look at the data there and figure out, are we going to be billing everyone for, you know, the nickel they inadvertently underpaid, or the $1.30 maybe that they truly didn't pay, or, you know, those kinds of things.
Other questions, comments? People feeling weary at this hour?
That does take us to the end of our planned presentations for this first night of budget meetings, right?
No, it doesn't.
What did we miss?
We have the orphans.
Oh, well, then you shouldn't stop talking. You should keep going.
Well, it's a separate deck.
Sorry.
So this is, so I refer to these as our orphans. So these are funds that don't have a, you know, a department that drives them. So I guess first slide, there's a slide for each one of these. So the grant and special assessment fund, I think what's relevant here is to look at, this is where the opioid national settlement dollars are coming into. And our understanding last year of what those revenues were going to look like were wildly overestimated. It's a huge challenge trying to understand and plan what the dollars truly are likely to be. This year, we've gotten in over $180,000, but that's for the first 2 years. So I just made a rough estimate that, and it's supposed to be going, each year goes down. It's an odd setup. So I just guesstimated maybe 60,000 is kind of an annual number. I'm hopeful it may turn out to be a little bit more robust, but so far we haven't actually spent any of those resources. We're holding them, and in the budget appropriations, there are dollars associated with the ability to spend money. Just there isn't a concrete plan at this point. It varies. Right now we're getting funding through 2 settlements, but we're signed up for 5 more. So I guess kind of each company that's involved is setting up their own terms and conditions for paying.
So I think Yeah, so each company has a different duration, a different amount. Some are paying the same amount every year, some are front-loading, some are back-loading, and I think the longest payment plan is 13 years, I believe. So, and I think the shortest might be 8, something like that. So,
Yeah, I think.
so each company has a different payment schedule, and we get whatever totals at the bottom of however many companies for however many years.
So that's the primary thing in this fund. And the DEID, the downtown assessment is in this fund too. And just, that is renewed every 3 years. We just went through a renewal process this year, and for the first time in over a decade, it was slightly increased. So that money is just passed through to the Downtown Association and put to good work, as we all see throughout the year. So I think that's it for this fund. Then there's the Transient Lodging Tax Fund. We're projecting not a big increase relative, well, actually, I guess, relative to the budget, it's not increased. But we are really coming out of COVID, but I think where we're hitting why revenue isn't growing much is our occupancy rates, there's just not a whole lot of room for growth, but there are a few new properties coming on, and so we'll see. Chances are I'll need to do a supplemental on this one next year. It's just, you never know on these.
So that's not what I remember from the Visit McMinnville projections when I was serving as liaison. I remember that they had a significantly anticipated growth in their budget. Something like, I don't remember what it was. It might not have been double, but it was their projections were that it
Quite a bit higher than they had originally planned.
Oh.
Which is borne out by the $1,920,000 from the prior year, or this year, I guess.
Yeah, so I haven't run, we just got this past quarter in, so just timing-wise, I haven't rerun for next year. So that's something, if the bandwidth is there, that I might bring back with a new number for the end of June. But given all of the balls in the air with this budget cycle, I'm not sure if I'll have the time to.
Haven't they done a projection? Usually they do a projection.
So the big jump was coming out of 21, 22 into 22, 23, and I mean, you see an almost $300,000 increase in the revenue. That was really driven by people traveling again. I think Jennifer's point is that there aren't any new hotel rooms being built into it, so the only growth is either in the rates that properties charge or increased occupancy. I think it looks like we're going to end up this year about 7% over the growth projection that was in the budget, and Visit McMinnville is projecting another 10.5% growth for next year. So we haven't completely right-sized those numbers to make sure we're on the same page.
Okay, and do we know generally what occupancy rates are, more or less, around town?
We don't.
Visit McMinnville does.
They'll actually be in front of the council at your next council meeting to provide their annual report and work plan, and so a couple of these questions I'm sure Jen and the team can answer.
I think that when they do come to present, if we could relay to them in advance, that would be something I would be specifically interested in hearing about, or where we really are in terms of occupancy
Yeah,
rate.
they'd be prepared to do that. We'll make sure they know.
So the next slide. So the telecommunications fund, this is associated with the cable television franchise dollars, and those are on a downward trend. So, and people know from your own lives about streaming is not a cable service, and more people are moving away from actual cable. And so we, we are seeing that in the numbers, and it has downstream consequences also for our partner, McMinnville Community Media, in terms of their revenue streams. So it's a challenging picture here. So next slide. The debt service fund. So these are voter approved bonds. Nothing's changed year to year. This is just essentially updated for the next year's totals and the amortization schedules. Yes, we can move on to the next. And then the insurance services fund. You all may recall when, I believe it was when the HR manager position was added maybe 5 years ago or so, the hope was that the excess reserves in the insurance services fund would pay for that position. I think initially the hope was maybe we could get 3 years.
2 to 2.5, right.
Okay, well, this fund this year in FY24 is continuing to pay for that, that position. So, and consequently, reserves are coming down, but we're still, by my estimation, in completely fine territory in terms of a prudent reserve fund for any insurance needs that could come up unexpectedly. So, I think this may be the last one. Yep. Okay. And then I also wanted to mention, I sent out, and I put on the table, there are 5 amendments so far that we've got going on this budget. One is, there was a market adjustment for general services employees in the police department. So that's about 25 grand. There's new spending that we thought we would do in FY23 that we're going to delay and do in FY24. So that's a wash in terms of budget. It's just wanting to make sure the appropriations are over next year. And then there's a technical shift. The biggest dollar amount shift is Walt Gowell recommended managing the loaning of the fire district slightly differently from an accounting perspective. So it needs to come out of the general fund, not out of wastewater directly. So that just means that there are transfers in the background, but nothing net changes for ending fund balance for wastewater or the general fund. It's just an accounting treatment that will make it more straightforward with the IGA that we eventually have with the new fire district board. So that's all I've got for these weary folks.
You have a question?
Questions?
Around the table?
Good, busy lady.
There are a few balls in the air, yes.
I do have one thing I'd like to say if I could. It's not a question, but I may not be here tomorrow night.
Oh.
So I just wanted to give a shout out to Susan Muir and her department for being super flexible with me on some rental situations that had occurred over the last month. Your staff down there is amazing, and I very much appreciate it.
Well, last year we adjourned at 9:52. It's now 9:39, so we're ahead of the game. You're getting better. There we go. So this is adjourned until 6 p.m. tomorrow. Same place, same folks.
Is there anything happening in here tomorrow, or can people leave their budget books where they are?
Yep, folks can leave it, yeah.
Leave them, if you want.
Not gonna go to bed.
Budgets. I mean, that's not funny.